Thank you. I am calling this meeting to order. This is a Redmond City Council study session held on Tuesday, May 12th, 2026, commencing at 7:15 p.m. Thanks for your patience, everyone. All council members are in attendance, and Mayor Bernie is joining us online. There are 4 items on the agenda tonight. The first is the 2026 state legislative session debrief, a 2027-2028 budget process, departmental budget overview with the Planning and Community Development Department, as well as the Police Department. Council will continue its discussion of its retreat matrix, and we will conclude with council talk time. So the first item on the agenda is the 2026 state legislative session debrief, and introducing this item will be Amy Tsai, our Chief Policy Officer. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, council members. Let me go ahead and get this presentation started. So Amy Tsai, Chief Policy Advisor, and I am joined today by Brianna Murray, our state lobbyist with Gordon Thomas Honeywell Government Relations. And I'll just take this title slide to just briefly note how grateful we are for her ever-present expertise on the Hill in supporting us in the legislative agenda, and just so fortunate to have her, and you'll see her expertise tonight. Setting a low bar there. Sorry, Brianna. So today we're going to cover the 2026 legislative session themes. Brianna will talk about some of the activities on the Hill that were going on this session. We will then transition together to talk about our city priorities and how those outcomes worked out for us this short session, and talk about some of the deep dive into some of the work that was going on to give you a flavor of the work that happens on the Hill for us, and then a brief recap of next steps.
Well, thank you, Amy. I'm going to kick us off with the legislative themes component, and I like this section of the presentation because I think it provides the context and grounding for which you can then understand and place some of the other issues that are more Redmond specific. So as a reminder, the legislature operates on a 2-year cycle, and this past legislative session was the second year of that 2-year cycle. As such, was a short 60-day legislative session. Democrats continued to hold the majority in both the House and the Senate by 59-39 in the House and 30-19 in the Senate. As the majority party, Democrats were able to establish the major themes and priorities of the session, and they focused on responding to actions of the federal government, tax reform, and a focus on affordability for Washingtonians. The major mechanical tasks of the legislative session was to consider legislation, including all bills that were considered in the first year of the legislative biennium that did not pass into law and carried over to the second year, as well as an additional 1,238 bills. Of the many thousands of bills that were under consideration, 268 bills passed into law this session. That is actually the lowest number to pass into law in a session over the past 5 years. There are a few different reasons for that low number. One is that the legislature tackled some really big issues that took a great deal of time. And the second is that the minority party pulled out every single procedural motion they could think of out of the rule book. In addition to working on bills, the legislature also had the task of developing supplemental budgets or mid-biennial budget adjustments amid shortfalls. When the legislature concluded the 2025 legislative session, they had developed a balanced biennial budget that would run July 1 of 2025 through June 30th of 2027. By the time the 2026 legislative session rolled around, revenue collections had come in flat, slightly below what was expected, nothing like a stark decline, but the cost of maintaining programs and existing services went up significantly. So in order to maintain those existing programs and services, the legislature really had to grapple with how to address a shortfall. The legislature outlined 2 different problem statements with that. One was the short-term and immediate need of balancing the 25-27 budget, and then the long-term need of readjusting, refocusing the state's tax code to support a lot of the new programs that Washingtonians have clearly indicated they want to see funded. So in an effort to bring about that more significant tax reform, the legislature advanced a millionaire's tax proposal and enacted it into law. The millionaire's tax proposal is in addition to a slate of tax changes that were made in 2025. So the overarching state tax code reform is really a combination of the 2025 tax code changes as well as the millionaire's tax in 2026. The bill 6346 is a 9.9% tax on income over $1 million that's scheduled to go into effect in 2029. In an effort to demonstrate that there's a reinvestment into working families, the bill included several different provisions on other tax policy, including a sales and use tax exemption on diapers, hygiene products, over-the-counter medications, a repeal of sales tax on services that was enacted in 2025, expansion of the B&O tax credit for small businesses to an additional 180,000 businesses, and an expansion of the working families tax credit to apply to another 460,000 families. There's also an intent to fund childcare and free lunch for all K through 12 students expressed in the bill. One thing that's notable about this bill in relation to cities is that the sales and use tax exemptions on diapers, hygiene products, and over-the-counter medications, those exemptions apply to state and local sales tax. Similarly, the sales tax on services that was included in Senate Bill 5814 that's being rolled back in the millionaire's tax bill applied to both state and local sales taxes. The impact of those sales and use tax exemptions and that rollback on cities, counties, and transit agencies is quite significant. We're still working with Department of Revenue to fully assess what the impacts are, and was very concerning. As the legislature was developing this policy, a lot of those decisions were being made by the House of Representatives. We shared with members of the House the concerns that these exemptions would have, the impact the exemptions would have on city budgets. And in response, the legislature allocated $200 million for city and county fiscal health that's scheduled in 2029. While it's nice and positive that that $200 million is included in there, the details around that $200 million are very much unknown. Whether or not it would be an ongoing revenue source or one time, whether or not it will grow with time, how that $200 million would be distributed amongst cities, counties, and transit agencies is all undetermined. The sales and use tax exemptions, as well as many of the other tax policies in the bill, will only go into effect if the millionaire's tax is upheld. The millionaire's tax, as I mentioned, doesn't go into effect until 2029, and that is to both allow for Department of Revenue to have the implementation timeline to implement this new tax, but also because it was anticipated that the tax would face a legal challenge. That legal challenge has already been filed and is beginning to work its way through the legal process and will likely take some time. I don't expect that we will have a legal outcome prior to the beginning of the 2027 legislative session. The other area where the tax could be overturned is through an initiative to the voters. It's my understanding that the Let's Go Washington group has begun collecting signatures on such an initiative this week, and so we'll see whether or not they're able to collect the necessary signatures by July. In addition to the millionaire's tax reform, the other notable tax item that the legislature took up this session was to repeal 2025 legislation that increased estate taxes and essentially rolled back the tax increase from 2025 to the prior levels. That was done really after feedback from many stakeholders in the state that there were negative impacts to that estate tax and that it made Washington State an outlier across the nation in the taxation level. All of that tax reform discussion, while robust, did not actually have an impact on the development of the mid-biennial adjustments. That was all long-term thinking, long-term impacts. So to meet the immediate need of developing the supplemental budgets, the legislature had to make several different changes. As a reminder, there are 3 different state budgets. The operating budget is the largest of the 3 budgets. It funds all state agency operations, K through 12, higher education, and the cities receive several state shared revenues through the operating budget. It's just over $80 billion, and during the 2026 legislative session saw a $2.4 billion increase. That $2.4 billion increase is really just to maintain the increasing cost of existing services. It did not allocate funding to many, if any, new programs, and there were several cuts also made to services within the budget. To balance the budget, $880 million was used from the Budget Stabilization Account or Rainy Day Fund, and $375 million was used from the Public Works Assistance Account. Additionally, there were a handful of tax loopholes or tax credits that were closed on data centers, insurance carriers, and wholesale prescription drug manufacturers. Both the transfer from the Budget Stabilization Account and the Public Works Assistance Account were backfilled through other sources. For the Budget Stabilization Account, it was backfilled by a transfer from the LEF 1 pension account, and the Public Works Assistance Account was backfilled with bond revenues. The transportation budget is a $16.6 billion budget, is largely funded with fuel taxes and other fees on like vehicle weight fees, driver's license fees, transportation-oriented fees, as well as Climate Commitment Act funds. In 2025, the legislature increased many of those fees modestly and then enacted a phased-in 6-cent gas tax increase. This year, the legislature bonded against some of those new revenue streams to generate an additional $1.2 billion over the next 6 years, so $250 million a year to be spent on preservation. Notably, no new projects were allocated funding in the transportation budget. The focus on the transportation budget now and seemingly into the future is on maintaining the existing system. The capital budget was a pretty standard budget across the 3 for a supplemental budget year. They used the remaining bonding capacity they had available to them from the full biennial budget development to make another $880 million in community projects. So the operating budget included several of these one-time measures, like with the Budget Stabilization Account, LEF 1 pension account, with the idea that long-term, more revenue will be coming into the accounts through the new tax reform, tax code changes that were made. As a result of sort of the one-time adjustments that are have been needed in order to get the state to this new tax code, the state has experienced an adjustment in their credit rating and a flag by credit rating agencies that could impact the state's AAA bond rating. And so the 2027 legislature is going to have a hefty task ahead of them, both in assuring credit agencies that there is stability within the 27-29 budget, and also working to develop a sustainable 2-year budget in light of the fact that the income tax is likely to still be being litigated. So a little bit of glimpse of what to come next, but let's focus on some of the City of Redmond priorities within all that context. Amy.
Thank you. Thanks, Brianna, for that overview. So you all spent some time in Olympia as well, and I want to give a big shout out and thank you to our amazing council for showing up, being present, being engaged, reading the weekly legislative summaries, and just really, when we needed that extra push, being there in Olympia to testify and show support on the bills where we see opportunities for movement. And so really appreciate your steady presence there. So we're highlighting here some, just a few of those moments, AWC City Action Days, obviously a great annual opportunity to get together with your fellow electeds across the state and where you have shared interests. And just, you always just show up very well there. You've got your strong contingent, one of the best percentage-wise attendances of elected officials per city, so always really appreciate seeing your presence there. And of course, we have our annual connection with our own legislative delegation, and so thank you to Brianna for always being a gracious host for that really good opportunity to have close contact and share those priorities directly with our electeds. And then a little brief nod here, we also in January had kicked off the legislative session highlighting our electric fire engine and other projects where we really benefit from state and federal support. And so I think this is just really a testament to how good a partnership we have with our delegation and with the state, thanks in large part to the fact that you are always present and showing up and engaged. And I'll also put in a side plug that you were really excellent this session in communicating, and that's really important to have that coordinated approach to know what each other's doing and talking about, and so just really appreciating you on all fronts there. So in terms of our legislative agenda, we had 3 main priority asks, and then we also have a list of regional issues and general support issues that are important to you. On that top page of the priority-specific asks and requests and priorities that we highlight, we had state support for vulnerable neighbors in light of what's going on across the country and the need for those social safety nets, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that on another slide. Also, we're going to give you a little more shout out on Hartman Park Playground results, and I will briefly mention that also on our legislative priority asks is the Maintenance and Operations Center, and the only brief mention I'll have there is that that's more of a flag for the upcoming session, that this is a facility that has exceeded its useful life, that we've outgrown, and so we will be looking to you to help continue that narrative forward into the next session. As a reminder, before we dive into the outcomes for this short session, that this is the tail end of a biennial budget. And so you had some asks last year as well. And as a reminder, not to let go of the fact that you had many successes last year that are, again, a testament to the strength of our city and how we show up, and to our delegation and their support. So really great outcomes on our asbestos cement water main replacement projects. Also the Intercultural City Services Center that's being stood up in Overlake. So great capital investments there. And we had some additional work on our multimodal access in that Overlake area where there is a significant amount of funding that we have fought to keep in the budget in the tight times that Brianna has been highlighting. And then you've also had some just regional successes last year in terms of rent stability. That was a high priority for you. So thank you for showing up in Olympia on that, and also your presence on getting the Producer Responsibility RAP Act passed and over the finish line after many years of effort. So just a lot of good activity. And another highlight from last year I'll just briefly mention is we also asked them to continue to fund grants. And so the Red Link, the pilot shuttle that you can see going around downtown that is off the ground, again, some support from the state. So just many ways in which the state shows up, which is really nice. So Brianna, if you want to talk about the first item.
Yeah, so we're going to go through the top priorities from this session, and the first one of those was state support for vulnerable neighbors. And as I started out under the session themes, this was a prioritization for the Democrats this upcoming session. And I think in a tough budget environment, there are a few opportunities where the legislature was able to advance this issue, and there are opportunities, I think, to continue to advance this issue into the next legislative session. So on social services space, the legislature prioritized SNAP and food assistance. The final budget included $370 million for SNAP and food assistance above what was in the base biennial budget. Notably, the city also supported House Bill 2238, which tasked the Department of Agriculture with developing a long-term food security strategy and making recommendations to the 2027 legislature. The legislature also put a lot of emphasis on ensuring that individuals continue to receive Medicaid, or is commonly referred to in Washington as Apple Health. They made a commitment to maintain core Apple Health eligibility, current eligibility, despite changes at the federal government. I would describe the actions of this legislative session, of this legislature, as bracing for what is anticipated to be further federal changes to the Medicaid program. I will note that the Apple Health program enrollment for new enrollments or expansions is frozen right now. They're not, the goal was on preserving Apple Health for those currently receiving that service, and there was not adequate resources in order to support envisioned expansions of Apple Health moving forward in future years. For refugee assistance, there's $8 million included in the budget to provide, new from the biennial budget, to provide legal assistance to immigrants and refugees coming into Washington. I will note that the refugee support that we saw in 2026 was in addition to a very sizable, I want to say $40 million investment that we saw in the base budget in 2025. There was also a huge effort to try and advance policies to protect the immigrant community. House Bill 2105 is an immigrant worker protection bill that requires employers to notify their employees if they receive notification of any sort of I-9 investigation. House Bill 2165 aims to increase penalties and prevent individuals from impersonating officers. For example, a federal ICE officer impersonating a law enforcement officer. And then Senate Bill 5855 saw a lot of media coverage, but creates a new civil cause of action for law enforcement officers that are utilizing face coverings. And the intention there is for it to apply to all levels of government. So I think from the legislature's assessment and in talking with members of the legislature that advanced these policies and attempted to advance others, this was a good start and a reflection of what could be done in a short 60-day session. We saw dozens more bills introduced in this subject area that are likely to return in 2027 and continue to advance the dialogue.
So the next priority ask on our agenda was Hartman Park, and this was the surprise outcome of the session. I will say that the climate was so tough, and I was trying to brace you all for disappointment. And just really, really big thanks to the strength of our delegation and all of your support articulating that and the priority need for this, that we were successful in getting funding in the amount of $515,000 for Hartman Park. So as you all know, but for the listening public, this is a deteriorating playground that has accessibility issues, and just generally it's a regional jewel. People come from all over to use it. You know the story because you carried that story to Olympia for us, but just really so pleased. And special thank you to Rep. Springer. What a nice capstone in our district. For his career, and then Senator Dinger as well for being really strong champions to pull this out of a hat. So we tried to do extra good by the thank you cards. So always try to give them that personal touch each year. So highlighting that they all got their little Hartman Park thank you card.
I also want to give you all credit. When we were developing the legislative agenda, I made the recommendation that the average appropriation within the capital budget is $250,000. This year, the average appropriation landed at $258,000. I'm quite proud of myself for having figured out how to calculate that at this point in my career. But you all put forward a request that matched the funding opportunity available. There are plenty of communities where I'll make that recommendation and council will say, yeah, but our funding need is really $2.7 million. And that may be true that that's your funding need, but the legislature just doesn't have the funds in off-session years. So I just want to give kudos to Amy and you all on council for developing a request that fit the political environment. Okay, so within your legislative agenda, there are regional priorities and then additional policy issues. I could probably talk for a very long time on all of these topics, but what I'm going to try and do is give you a little bit of a flavor of where some of the discussions in these regional priority areas, and encourage you to read the full written legislative report that's over a dozen pages. So the first one that you all have invested and demonstrated a lot of leadership on is on affordable housing and fostering housing stability. This session, the major success was Representative Salahuddin's bill, House Bill 1859, which revisited a density bonus that you all are already required to offer on religious organization properties. That density bonus previously had a requirement of 100% of the units being affordable. This bill created some additional flexibility so you all can establish lower thresholds for affordability and hopefully result in more housing being constructed on those properties. House Bill 2442 provided you flexibility within 1590 and 1406 sales tax funds. Those are two funds that support housing, and the flexibility that was provided was to allow you to use those revenue streams to support existing housing units, whereas before they were very focused on constructing new housing units. The legislature provided that flexibility in anticipation of a decline of housing funding at the federal level. So this would allow you to use some existing revenues to backfill that federal loss of revenues. And then the legislature made an additional $275 million investment in the Housing Trust Fund, making the full biennial investment into that account the highest that it's ever been in history. I think it was just over $900 million. For transportation funding, we really didn't see any significant funding allocated to the local level for preservation. That was probably the one big disappointment in how the transportation budget was managed. As I mentioned, revenues were bonded against to fund the preservation of the state system, but there was no allocation made to cities or counties, TIB, CRAB, VMSIB, for maintenance of local roadways. The notable positive, if you're looking for a silver lining, was that the Public Works Assistance account sweep was backfilled. The legislature could have chosen to not backfill it, which would have created a whole series of challenges with existing loans, as well as eliminated an opportunity to fund not just transportation projects, but important utility projects. So good news is that we saw the account backfilled, and so it will continue to operate moving forward. On the economic development front, the legislature approved a series of reforms to the existing tax increment financing program. Those reforms were prompted by concerns from special purpose taxing districts. I will note we've started to get some feedback that some of those reforms may need to be readjusted at some point in order to ensure that revenues generated under that financing tool can be bonded against. But overall, it reflected a really strong compromise between cities and taxing districts to allow that program to continue to be available in Washington State. The legislature also prompted the development of a statewide economic development and competitiveness strategic plan. That work, the development of that strategic plan, will start this interim, and we'll have some initial recommendations for the legislature in 2027. On autonomous vehicles, I think there was a lot of talk leading up to the beginning of the legislative session that autonomous vehicles would be a prominent discussion this session. It turned out not to be a very prominent discussion. And there was one bill introduced that didn't receive significant consideration. It was Senate Bill 6243, which proposed a statewide regulation of AVs. And I think we'll see some iteration of that bill proceed forward in 2027. Oh, there's a slide missing. Okay, well, in addition to those regional priorities, you all also outline in your legislative agenda a whole other series of issues that you all support: housing, environmental sustainability, planning and infrastructure, general government, community vitality, public safety, and criminal justice. And within those categories, we monitor hundreds of bills and end up weighing in on several dozen. In the back of the written report that you all received is a bill tracking chart that's included in the weekly report. And we really try and capture the nuances of those bills throughout the session in those weekly reports. So we are not planning to go through those in super great detail this evening. However, one of the things we wanted to highlight for you was just the nuance of some of the different bills that get considered each session. So we did pick 4 different areas to call out for you and provide a little bit more detail on that fall under those hundreds of different bills under consideration. I would just note, we picked out these 4 just because they're seemed like high impact legislation, but we could have added probably a dozen slides to the presentation and kept going with all the impacts to HR and fire and all the different departments. So the first one is around city budget stability. As I mentioned, most state shared revenues were maintained, but not all. We saw that sweep to the Public Works Assistance account, as well as a $5 million reduction in the revenues that are shared around cannabis between the state and cities. We saw some flexibility with existing revenues in 2442, not just on the housing revenues, but also REIT revenues can now be spent on nuisance abatement and some other minor adjustments. I already outlined the impacts of the sales and use tax exemptions and the millionaire's tax and what that would mean for city budgets. I'd also note that one of the trends we're seeing is that as the state's budget is being funded with more progressive revenue streams, that city budgets are being funded with more regressive revenue streams. In the last 2 years, the legislature granted 2 new sales tax authorities for cities to consider, one on public safety and one to support children, youth, and families. And while generally cities are appreciative of new tools in the toolbox to help support community needs, the more recent new tools being sales tax based move the city tax code into a more regressive stance. And I would just say as an overarching comment, and Council President Stewart has been participating in some of the AWC Legislative Priority Committee conversations, it's generally unclear how city budgets fit into the state's overarching budget reform conversation. And so a lot of that dialogue will continue in partnership with other cities and into the 2027 session. But I would say there were a lot of red flags in this past legislative session when it comes to city budget stability. Another item we wanted to highlight for you all was Senate Bill 6026. I have to give a huge shout out to Carol Helland for her work on this bill, but also her work on dozens of bills over the years. I think you could look back at any land use bill in the past decade and see Carol's marks on it. She's really provided a profound impact on the state in terms of land use, and this bill was no exception. This bill was a priority of Governor Ferguson and Lieutenant Governor Heck and had a large coalition of support from the Business Roundtable, Microsoft, Amazon, Master Builders Association, BIAW, just this robust coalition behind it. As introduced, it would have mandated that cities allow residential uses in all commercial zones and would have removed the ability for cities to require ground floor commercial on any development. That latter part in particular was very concerning, not just to Redmond, but to many communities who've been working very hard to develop walkable communities, vibrant communities with small business support. And so there's significant pushback on that particular component around ground floor commercial. I think Redmond in particular brought a strong voice to the conversation as a community that's been developing a lot of housing and has been struggling to ensure that there is adequate and affordable space for small businesses throughout the community. The final version of the bill reflected a lot of input, and I'll defer to Carol to correct me, but I think is something we can kind of hold our nose, live with, and continue to proceed forward with. Residential is authorized in all commercial zones under the final version of the bill, with exceptions, including industrial zones. The city can continue to require ground floor commercial in transit-oriented development station areas, as well as 40% of the total acreage of areas zoned for commercial mixed use outside of the station area. So station area and then everything else, 40% of everything else. There are some other exceptions that apply throughout the bill that came about as a result of dialogue, but that's the general framework that the legislature landed on. I want to give a special appreciation and thanks to the House Local Government Committee Chair, Representative Davina Doer. She did great work in engaging stakeholders when this bill came to her committee, and she landed on this structure for the final version of the bill after receiving feedback from cities. You all will have 18 months to implement this policy. And I also just want to note that we engaged every member of the Redmond delegation on this, and even those who in the past have not had a strong passion for land use, aligned with you all in your vision that you've been advancing in Redmond, and I want to make sure we give great appreciation for them. For many of them, particularly in the Senate, this was a challenging bill for them to vote in alignment with Redmond on. I did okay? Okay. For this next bill on automated license plate readers, I just want to note that Representative Salahuddin worked really hard to thread the needle on this very difficult issue, to put in place a statewide framework that's aimed at protecting the privacy of individuals and having the technology continue to be used in areas of the state that choose to use it. So just to note that he spent a great deal of time and energy in developing that policy. And the final bill to highlight is the state's latest revisiting of the shelter, transitional housing, emergency housing, and permanent supportive housing siting. The legislature has amended this statute now on a couple different occasions. This is the latest iteration. Prior to this legislative session, you all as a city were mandated to allow step housing in all areas where hotels are allowed, and permanent supportive housing in residential zones. Prior to this bill, you were also able to require reasonable occupancy, spacing, and intensity use requirements for public health and safety purposes, and had the ability to require public engagement and operations requirements. The advocates on the other side felt like there were cities who were inappropriately using that authority to put in operations and occupancy, spacing, and intensity of use requirements that would essentially prohibit step housing from advancing within the community. So this bill came about as a result of that feedback. The bill requires self-certification from the provider on public engagement and operations, rather than allowing the city to establish those requirements. One area where the City of Redmond provided a lot of input based on your all's experience was the language around what happens when a city donates money, property, or a long-term lease of at least 50 years to a project. The bill originally would have said that even if you are contributing funds or land, you're not able to require any sort of operational or public engagement requirements. We were able to get language inserted to restore that authority, and I think that's a reflection of your all's experience and information you all were able to convey as a result of the experience. You all will have 24 months to implement a policy that complies with the new regulations. I think with that, we'll move into next steps. Amy's like, Brianna, you've talked too long. Okay, so we're wrapping it up. As all of you know, the legislature is now moving into election season. All members of the House and half the members of the Senate are up for re-election. We saw 14 legislators announce retirements. And so we're going to see a turnover in individuals, if not in party. The general thinking is that this year, that Democrats will likely still have majority in both chambers going into next session. I've already begun doing outreach for the Maintenance and Operations Center and engaging capital budget leadership over the interim months leading into next session. So I'm taking you all at your word that that is a multi-year effort and you plan to put it on your 2027 legislative agenda and are starting to get a head start on that. And with Council President Stewart's engagement, are continuing to work with our partners at the Association of Washington Cities on city budget reform and other, I think utility affordability is the other main topic that's come up. Amy, do you want to describe next steps specific to council discussions?
Sure, thank you. I hope that you found like the deeper dive on just some select bills to give you a better flavor for the in-depth activities that are going on. Excuse me, so I hope you found that helpful. So looking ahead to next session, that will hopefully inform your preparation for the 2027 agenda. So encouraging you to share feedback and ideas now. I'll be engaging with the department directors and with you as well this summer to start collecting that feedback. And then we're going to bring back for first discussion September 8th at your September 8th study session, a draft for you to look at and opine on. For those of you who are new, we then come back at a second bite at the apple. October 13th is on the calendar right now to have second discussion. And the idea is we actually tend to be a little earlier than a lot of other cities, and that's to our advantage because we hit the ground running. And so we are meeting with our legislators early. They know what's coming up and they can incorporate it into their thinking early and often. So that does benefit us, but it does mean that we get started on it pretty much as soon as this presentation wraps up.
And I think we're happy to answer questions.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. It is such a delight to have this duo back in chambers and giving us an update on the challenges that we successfully faced in the city and the success that we continue to have. It's always just personally for me, one of the more enjoyable conversations we get to have all year. I do have a couple of questions of my own here, but I'll open it up if there are questions for either Amy or Brianna. Okay, I'm going to ask one that's come up a little bit in chambers so far this spring, Brianna. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened with eMotos and what we expect out of the eMoto work group? I think that was a question that Councilmember Parsi had introduced earlier in the spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I sent Amy my May monthly report, and eMotos is featured in that report. We're going to send it out tomorrow, along with any follow-up items from this presentation. So the legislature did pass legislation this session on eMotos. It included some language that ensures that certain types of eMotos are no longer legal under state law, but it didn't provide a firm definition on eMotos. Instead, the legislature directed a work group to meet over the interim to develop that definition and make a recommendation to the 2027 legislature to consider. So I would say like half the work was done, and then we've got some more work to do in 2027, and that work group is just kicking their work off.
Thank you. Other questions for the team? Okay, I'll chime in with one more, which was a really successful question last year for us. So the next time we see you, it'll be September. We'll be working on our draft legislative agenda. As we are progressing through the summer, what are some of the things that we should keep in mind in order to be heading toward not just an agenda that we like, but one that has a chance of being successful?
For the leg agenda, not
For our 2027 legislative
For
agenda.
your 2020 yeah.
Meeting the moment and the dynamics of the legislature as we currently understand them.
Yeah. So I think you all have kind of already outlined a request for the Maintenance and Operations Center as being a priority for 2027. And I think that fits with the funding opportunities that are available next session. With it being a new biennial budget, there should be ample budget capacity to make a sizable investment in a project that has such a significant impact on the city. And so I think that fits with the budget realities. I don't foresee there being significant funding opportunities within the transportation budget. And I think the opportunities for funding within the operating budget likely need to be focused on the broader impacts to city budgeting. As far as policies go, anything that costs money is going to be hard. So any sort of politically viable cost-saving measures would be welcomed. And what do I mean by that? Well, for every program that seems like it's not very helpful is somebody else's like sacred program that is causing, is like resulting in great community good. And so I think through offline conversation and consultation, we can kind of suss out whether there's an opportunity to create change in certain spaces or whether it's simply too high of a priority to the right person to be politically viable. Does that help?
Absolutely. I found that helpful. Thank you so much. Councilmember Kritzer.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much for the amazing work, both of you, advocating on behalf of our city. Really excited about the Hartman Park update. And also to see the investments specifically for our most vulnerable neighbors and that legislation that passed to help support our residents. So really, really important work in a lot of different places. You mentioned a little bit about some of the more regressive policy tools for cities and that there is more discussion around, especially at the AWC level. I know we heard that from Council President Stewart about that in terms of looking forward of some opportunities. And I'm curious if you can just share some more thoughts on that as we look forward at some things that we might as a council discuss as well.
Yeah, so I think the next, we haven't had a chance to debrief on this, but I think the next AWC Legislative Priorities Committee discussion is going to focus on, okay, city budget stability is the top priority across all cities. What does that mean to each city? And what does it mean other than more money from the state? Because more money from the state is probably the easiest thing to ask for, but also the hardest thing for the state to provide. And I hope that around the table there will be a lot of different ideas presented, but I also anticipate that it will be hard to find agreement on wholesale city budget reform around a table of city electeds that don't even reflect all 281 cities. So a potential path forward could be some sort of direction that the legislature provides to do a study, work group, something to make recommendations back to the legislature on what city budget reform could look like, whether that's adding in new revenue streams, changing how property tax is imposed, finding replacement revenue streams for sales tax, reducing the state sales tax so the city sales tax isn't having as significant of an impact in regressivity. I think the options are endless.
And if I may, I would just add, there's where you can find revenue, and then there's where you can contain costs. And obviously, you are all regularly engaged in containing costs for the city, but we really want to highlight for the state the cost impacts of their bills on cities. And so carrying that message forward as well, that when they pass bills, there are local impacts, and they're often very laser focused at the state because they're solving a state problem. And so making sure we elevate the local impact story. So your awareness and thinking around how to carry that message forward, because it's always difficult. What they're trying to do can have very strong benefits, and then you have to weave in the unintended financial consequences and how you balance and come out with where your priority is on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And I'll just note, in our agenda as well was in the support area was to support progressive revenue efforts. So some of what we saw in the legislature made sense this year. I think continuing that conversation forward to say, how do we advance progressive revenue, both at the state level as well as locally in terms of tools that we have is just a really powerful conversation. So appreciate that. And keeping cities whole as well.
Yeah, and I want to be very clear. I think in all the advocacy on the millionaire's tax around the around the impact to city budgets through the sales and use tax exemptions, I don't think in any of those conversations was there a suggestion that the legislature not pursue tax reform for themselves. It was just, if you're going to make these sales and use tax exemptions, there are impacts to city budgets. So I want to be clear that concern didn't take the form of being opposition to their efforts.
Thank you. Any final questions? Comments? Councilmember Procria.
Thank you. I'm just curious on the topic of SB 6026, if there was conversation in the legislature about, right now it's, or at least how it was originally written, it's generalized for any city with a population of over 30,000. But if there was conversations around, or if there were conversations around individualizing that based off of, the housing goals that cities are working towards in their individual comp plans. I ran into Senator Alvarado the other day, and we had a very brief discussion. But I was just curious.
Yeah, so I think that was actually a suggestion that Carol made, was that if you're meeting your housing targets, can you be exempt from the bill? I think one of the challenges with that is the bill applies statewide, and you all here in the Puget Sound region have the Puget Sound Regional Council that's doing a lot of target setting. You don't see that same in-depth analysis occurring throughout the state to have apples for apples data in order to be able to say, here's the benchmark that we're looking at to ensure whether or not a jurisdiction is or is not meeting those housing targets. And so because that structure is not standardized across the state, it would be really hard to build an exemption in statute around that concept. But yeah, I think that's...
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. Yeah.
Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. And thank you all for all the work and all the great updates throughout the session. Just sitting here thinking about, as we move into our city budget conversations, what in your mind do you think that we could do to safeguard our community that the impacts of the state budget next cycle are going to be potentially seeing cuts? You mentioned the Apple Health. Maybe there's things that we can do on our end to protect our community. Just thinking along those lines.
I mean, investments to offset
Yes.
anticipated state cuts.
I know the public defenders is one area they're looking at as well, healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, for public defense, that's a standard that you all are going to have to implement. I mean, there's a fair number of those. I don't know that the Medicaid one, that there's a mandate likely to come down to cities. If there's a mandate that's likely to come down through Apple Health, it would probably be through other county or the behavioral health organizations. And I don't really see them passing that type of a mandate down. Is your question more what you would, like, if they eliminate food assistance and then you all would want to prioritize it in
Correct.
your budget?
Yeah, things that we can do to safeguard.
Yeah, I mean, I think the areas that we saw them start to make cuts were in the childcare space. So I think if you're doing local investments in childcare, certainly local investments in any sort of food assistance are supporting that same population. I'm not sure you can do a lot in the Medicaid healthcare space just based on structurally how that is put together. I would say like rental assistance. That's another area where the state has provided a lot of rental assistance and low-income utility assistance. I think the low-income utility assistance largely is funded through the CCA, so should continue to be funded, but you never know.
You know, just offer a wild random tangent that all of this relates to affordability. And so they may have an action that has an impact on your ability to get your groceries and stay in your house. But then there's others, like the regional utility rates and other things. And so showing up and being part of those conversations is sort of a way to lift up the entire affordability problem. So at the end of the day, we're all paying our bills, and we don't really necessarily, savings on one side does translate to savings in another side for an individual household. So.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think with that, we will wrap up this item. Really appreciate you both so much for being here. We will be thinking and talking to community all summer long through all of our engagement, and be ready to chat with you about our draft agenda in September. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item on our agenda tonight is the 2027-2028 budget process departmental overviews. Tonight, we will be discussing the Planning and Community Development Department as well as the Police Department. So we have a couple staff joining us here in the room, and Kelly Cochran, our Finance Director, will introduce this item. Following this item, Council, if there is interest in a short recess, we can absolutely do so. I know we had an early start today. So welcome, Director Cochran. Director Helen, nice to see you.
Good evening, and I think that you did a very thorough job in introducing this item. We're going to go ahead and start off with Director Helen for Planning and Community Development, and Chief Flo is joining us online from a conference, and we'll move to him next. So we'll get it over to Carol, and I'm in charge of technology, so good luck to us all.
Thank you, Kelly. Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. So Carol Helland, Planning and Community Development, and we are here to do our department. That wasn't it. I think it's your computer. So, I'm going to have you do it. So our mission statement is that the Planning and Community Development Department exists to prepare, promote, and implement Redmond's community vision. And you've observed Planning and Community Development lean into this mission as you've supported our work through several actions over the last few years that are notable. Redmond 2050, the Transportation Plan Update, Transportation Master Plan Update. We had some grant success with the $975,000 we secured for RedLink, and permitting appropriate development that benefits the public, and then engagement with our boards and commissions and committees and the community. So I think we're all committed to that mission as we proceed in our department. Basically, the department overview includes several different functions: our building permits and inspection function, code enforcement, long-range planning, and code development, which is who you see mostly in front of you at the council meetings, our land use entitlements and environmental review, civil engineering review, which is part of our permitting function, housing, homelessness, and human services, our transportation planning, engineering, and transportation demand management, and economic development and tourism. Just a couple of things. This slide represents the baseline budget plans that Planning and Community Development either lead or contribute to. Of the total 107.35 FTEs, the authorization for Planning and Community Development, just for your reference, is 93.2 FTEs. So going through the packages specifically. Going through the packages specifically, Package 5 supports our comprehensive community response program. as the items that are highlighted are our community health manager, which is one of 3 FTEs in the 2025-2026 budget authorized by council to support our city's community health program. The mental health professional is shown here, and there are 2 social workers that are shown on the next slide. But at the same time, the FTEs were authorized in the 2025-2026 budget, the King County passed a crisis care levy, making it possible for Redmond to rely on 24-hour crisis care services provided by countywide mobile rapid response crisis team. We call that MRCAT when we're referring to it for the council. And so staff had recommended putting those positions on hold while city evaluated and gathered data on the county's efforts. And because of the success of that partnership with King County, staff has evaluated the 3 vacant positions and continuing needs of the city program, and will begin to recruit for these positions in the coming months to fill identified gaps in that community health program. We have also been, had our first meeting again with our subcommittee on that topic and also shared that plan with them last week. Our code enforcement officer on this page was one approved in the 2025 budget. We were able to hire that 3rd code compliance officer in January of this year. That was the first addition to the code compliance ranks for the least 30 years, to my knowledge, and with the complexity of regulations and increased population, we really appreciated that add in the budget last year. So thank you. Okay, so this is still part of Budget Packet 5, and the social worker positions and the training line items are on the same track as I previously described for the broader deployment of the 3 positions for the that were previously on hold. The severe weather pilot actually was conceived when City of Bellevue and Redmond were hearing from our service providers that, from our shelter providers, that additional resources would be really helpful during the severe weather capacity events. So we believe the pilot's been very successful and hoping to make this an ongoing support item. The Care Solace project has also been completed. If you'll recall, that was a one-time grant award using opiate abatement settlement funds, and that was for mental health coordination services available to Lake Washington School District, staff, students, and their families. So that project has been completed. So City Council will be reviewing, receiving a staff report on the status of this World Cup package number 13 on May 19th. So I'm not going to go into very much detail so that we keep this presentation manageable. I do want to thank both the mayor and the city council for their actually foresight in funding all the early contributions of resources to the World Cup efforts. And as a teaser for May 19th, I'll say that this cross-departmental effort has yielded significant community engagement and city preparedness results. So stay tuned. We'll tell you more about that on the 19th. So package number 14 reflects the city's economic development program. For the program manager economic development, we hired Dominique Meeks, you've met him, to be our small business assistance program manager in Q1 of 2025. He has been a fantastic addition to our team. And he's launched a monthly economic development newsletter reaching nearly 2,000 businesses, monthly small business office hours, and individualized assistance and quarterly business meetings. We are partnering with finance to lead the effort at a business license audit. We are hoping to understand the gap in business license compliance and provide recommendations to council for how to address that gap in the future. Southeast Redmond Industrial Growth Center market study was a study that you all funded as part of the 2025-2026 budget, and actually was somewhat of the topic of conversation on the recent item that you were talking about for the comprehensive plan docket of the Redmond Flex site. And results of the market study will be presented to the City Council with recommendations about how we might retain more industrial and manufacturing businesses and why these are important to our economic development ecosystem and good health. The home-based business survey, after reviewing potential consultants and work completed in peer jurisdictions, the project team determined that utilizing an intern to engage and collect information and feedback from home-based businesses would be a more appropriate approach to advancing the needs of home-based business code amendments and identifying the scope that was appropriate. And we're hoping that that will help us understand the profile and needs of home-based businesses in Redmond in a better way. The remaining funding will also be used for marketing material translations, community-based organization support, and event supply needs. And we have been talking recently, I know you all have received many emails from people who are doing tenant improvements for their properties and finding it difficult. So actually some of those navigation services, I've spoken with Councilmember Soni about that and kind of her experience in developing a business in Redmond, and we're really trying to lean into helping people who have language barriers or just lack of expertise in that area really get a good footing on how they can create a home-based business that may actually matriculate later to a small business in one of our other commercial spaces. So package 15, it represents our Lodging Tax Advisory Committee budget. Councilmember Kretzer is our chair of the LTAC. And the funds from the last budget were one-time in nature because we had a very large reserve to advance actions identified in the 2024 Tourism Development Strategic Plan. And we were able to create a partnership and with the tourism industry and then recommend many approaches to the council that were approved in that strategic plan, in our tourism strategic plan. What we are seeing, and I'll note this in the performance metrics later, is we are seeing a slowdown in our tourism industry. And so we aren't expecting the kind of excess funding that we have had in prior budgets for this coming year. And we do continue to coordinate with Councilmember Kretzer's help with between the city tourism staff and the staff that are from Bellevue who administer the tourism promotion area to fund, to essentially collaborate budgets and fund essentially in a more holistic way. Let's see. Okay, so package 16 supports infrastructure management. It's a coordination between planning and public works. And we had a limited duration position in transportation planning and engineering that was ultimately converted to an ongoing position in the 2025-2026 budget. And Mary LaRue, who you're familiar with, who's made presentations before you, is our transportation planner. And she splits her time between managing the Red Link program and our transportation demand management efforts, as well as supporting planning initiatives. So she also actually led quite a bit of the engagement for our transportation master plan update. So that was a great conversion, and we appreciate that. Package 17 is a collaboration between planning and police that supports development of parking policy and enforcement improvements. And the transportation demand management policy planning position was previously a limited duration position that was converted to ongoing. Caroline Chapman has done the presentations for you, and she was the one who spearheaded the parking existing conditions report and has come to City Council last year and gives policy implementation and enforcement guidance. The shared parking circulation, as I mentioned earlier, was where we were very successful in getting the grants that helped support the implementation of Red Link. And we just did a presentation on that, so I'm feeling like I probably don't need to talk much more about that here. So that brings us to our performance measures. The first group of performance measures is related to building inspection and code compliance functions, where we have had pretty much year-over-year success in achieving our performance objectives. I think for these, and just I'll wait, and if you have questions, I can answer them, but what I'll do is just highlight a couple of the ones that either look like there's been significant change or that are new. So on the, our next one is the dashboard indicator associated with housing units, growth targets and housing units, and it shows that Redmond continues to be on track to meet our growth targets. We were talking about that a little bit with Brianna earlier. Redmond 2050 has us adding about 20,000 units of housing over a 20-year time horizon, which equates to a pace of roughly 1,000 units per year, for a total of 56,539 units by 2050. Redmond's consistently outpaced that number. In 2024, we added almost 1,500 units. In 2025, we added almost 1,400 units. In 2026, because a lot of those projects were permitted prior to the update of the comprehensive plan, we anticipate over 2,300 units of housing to be introduced and finalized in Redmond. And of note, 380 of those represent homeownership units, which has been an area that we've been really trying to push. That number also does not include all of the infill housing that we're seeing in neighborhoods like Rose Hill. What's interesting to note in addition is we have almost 3,700 dwelling units currently in review in the pipeline. I would mention we put up the housing dashboard, so if you haven't explored that on the website, it's probably a good place to look. It has the most up-to-date data. Housing is reported in different ways from different data sets. So that is probably the most up-to-date information, especially the market rate information, which is downloaded every night from our InterGov permitting system. You'll see from this metric that I do want to point out that land use application timelines have been improving, but there is still more work to do. This measure will benefit from our process improvement work that we have underway in development services. It will also benefit from phase 2 of our InterGov updates that will refine workflows to shorten timelines and potentially allow for the adoption of AI tools to streamline application intake and determinations of application completeness. But that is continuing to be a work in progress. We have a lot of dedicated staff and they work very hard, so we're trying to work on the systems that actually create barriers for them to do their best work. The group of performance measures that's next speaks more directly to the city's progress in creating cost-controlled affordable housing units, and we're required to report these numbers annually. This database includes income-restricted units funded by government subsidy, which are often referred to as government-subsidized housing, and units created without the use of government subsidy that are income-restricted and projected to remain affordable for the long term. So that includes units such as our regulatory requirements, inclusionary zoning. It includes our incentive zoning requirements and density bonuses and our multifamily tax exemption units. Okay, this group of performance measures indicates the impacts of our human services fund investment, and the dashboard is only updated following the end of the budget biennium, so you'll note that we only report basically when we're done reviewing the applications and we understand what the gap is going to be, which becomes an indicator for the future biennium. Let's see. So the dashboard indicator on this slide is related to economic development, And it is a new dashboard indicator, although we were able to get some retroactive information. And retail sales tax is a measure of our consumer spending, which is a key driver for our local economy, and can also be used to gauge economic health. We wanted to see an consistent increase in retail sales tax, and we'll be monitoring that for trends and any anomalies that we might need to investigate in the future. We will use that information to help us with our small business outreach and other economic support structures. The percent change in resident business license is also a new measure. Previous reporting on businesses was a total business licenses, including licenses that were doing work in Redmond, but were not a Redmond business. So consultants that were doing work here have to get a Redmond business license. So to have a more accurate accounting of the number of businesses in Redmond, we're going to actually start reporting based on the trends of resident business licenses. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that the study that we're doing on the business license audit will actually help us better understand business license compliance and data. And we'll work with finance, who oversees the business licensing program, to implement recommendations as that result from that study. Oh, and the reason for non-applicable on the last one, the performance measure that compares jobs growth to growth targets, is based on data received from PSRC, and we simply haven't gotten that data yet. Okay. These slides, these next batch of performance measures tell us about the health of the city's tourism industry. We had very strong growth post-pandemic that exceeded pre-pandemic revenue targets, and the dashboard measure is indicating a flattening of lodging tax, with 2025 revenue coming in about negative 5.86%, or down about $40,000 compared to 2024. So continued economic uncertainty, rising gas prices, they're putting a strain on international travel especially, but just actually travel, as my kids will tell me how much it costs every time they have to fill their gas tank, just to distances greater than 50 miles away. So we will be watching that for indications of return on investment and how we can make sure and contribute to the fund and reinvest in growth. For the visitation performance measure, we also are seeing that as a flat number, and that's basically as a result of the same factors that we're having people travel less. We're hoping that I know that they've down estimated the amount of people traveling for World Cup, but we're still hoping to see some really healthy visitation to the city of Redmond during that time period. Travel Time Reliability Index measures the consistency and dependability of travel times from day to day and across different times of the day, rather than just an average travel time. It is multimodal, so it includes driving, transit, biking, and it's averaged across those modes. The index is basically a ratio between average travel time and days with the high travel times. And the smaller the ratio, the better. And if you have questions about that, I am going to defer to Michael Hintz to explain it. Anyway, this measure is one that Public Works actually does track, and is at likely a handful of high traffic corridors, and it uses basically they use a combination of our adaptive signal data and big data to track that performance measure. The other measures are pretty self-explanatory. Trips made by transit, those are all trying to achieve our goals of increasing alternative modes of transportation and decreasing single occupancy vehicle usage. The mobility report card is a dashboard indicator of city success at delivering capacity infrastructure projects and where it's needed to support growth. As you'll see, that number has ticked up just a little bit. The city has been growing very rapidly, and so it does put pressure on our ability to keep pace with the growth that demands new infrastructure and expanded infrastructure. The percentage of streets and sidewalk, the reason for those not applicable at this point in time is that staff is currently working to improve that data set based on some of the work that Public Works is doing, so we don't have accurate information to reflect at this point in time. And the percentage of low-stress pedestrian crossings is a new measure, so that's why we have the NAs in that category. Okay, the final performance measure, feels like I had all the performance measures for the entire city.
Very thorough report.
These measures are an indicator of outcome of our community health program. These are all new performance measures from the 2025-2026 budget. That's why we don't have the 2023-2024 numbers. And those will be the ones that we will use to track our community health progress. So department highlights from 2025-2026. I think I've gone through many of them. Plymouth Housing was an accomplishment, both from a permitting perspective and from just the financial perspective, the transfer of the property. It was complex, and that project's well underway if you haven't seen it. We also executed a purchase and sale agreement for the Prisma project, which is run by Bellwether, where we'll be providing, buying the condo space that will allow us to have a presence at the first station once we get into Redmond for kind of business support and also tourism. Human Services funded and served over 33,000 people. We delivered over 700 hours of homeless outreach services. Adopted the Transportation Master Plan. I did want to note that Development Services issued almost 9,700 permits and did almost 46,000 inspections in 2025, and that was actually up from 2024, which when Kelly and I sat down to do the budget at the beginning of 2025, it's like, oh, there's going to be a recession. We're not going to be having as much work. Well, here we are. Some of our surrounding communities are seeing tail off in permit activity, and we just continue to see growth in that sector. And then we have been advancing small businesses and small business and World Cup readiness, which you'll hear more about on the 19th. And we've been engaging with over 2,000 small businesses to strengthen their economic viability. By way of challenges, housing demand and affordability continue to be an issue. It's a challenge for buyers, in addition, because we're adding over 2,300 units of housing in 2026. Some developers are pulling to the sideline a little bit. They are perceiving the market as being saturated, and they want some of that development to be leased up before they venture into construction projects. We also have revenue uncertainties, both from federal funding and the permit volumes. The city generally gets paid the same amount whether for a permit, whether a developer works quickly or whether they string out the process. But the problem is that actually does present some revenue complications for us in maintaining core staffing levels, and it might require us to rely on some development services revenue if we can see that pull back and have projects placed on hold while some of those housing units are actually leased or purchased. Big zoning changes. When big zoning changes happen, they create unpredictability, and that affects developers. They, again, kind of move to the sidelines sometimes and see if they wait out for interpretations to change, staff to get more expertise, their own professionals to get more familiar with the code. And what we also see is the state legislative changes, as Brianna described earlier, is the states being a lot more intrusive into local zoning And that has also created unpredictability and also added to our workload in our long-range planning area because we have had to respond to more state mandates to do things more quickly after we just spent 4 years updating our comprehensive plan. Intergov permitting platform and process changes, we have those underway. Phase 1 is going to be completed in June. We're doing user acceptance testing right now. The flip is scheduled to go from a system that is housed on our servers to a cloud-based system. In June, the system will be down for a couple of days. We're doing a lot of outreach with our development community, just so they know that and they're not surprised. Then when we get to phase 2, we will be working on workflow changes and simplification and timeline reductions that will impact potentially staff availability to work on permit submittals and may impact timeline performance for a period of time, but then we expect to recover and have that performance improve consistently as a result of those efforts. GIS and data analytics continues to be an issue, as you saw from all our performance measures. They actually draw from so many different data sources, and they all actually report at different times of the year. And then the state and local governments that we report to also ask for different information on the same subjects. So Brianna and I will try to address that at the next legislative session, or Brianna will, to try and get alignment between agencies who are requesting information from us. But we also just have a demand for data analytics that's just not getting met by our current staffing levels right now. So that continues to be a challenge. And then just meeting the growth demands, as we talked about, that are impacting transportation, housing, and small businesses in the city. So that's planning and community development in a nutshell.
Thank you, Director Helen and Director Cochran. Really appreciate this overview. If it feels like a lot, folks, about 1 in 5 City of Redmond employees is covered in the presentation that we just heard, and another 1 in 5 will be covered in the next one. So these are some big departments tonight. Who would like to kick us off? Questions for the directors? Councilmember Forsyth and then Councilmember Soni.
Just circling back on the Carousel grant that we got. When you mentioned that, that had completely fallen off my radar. So I realized that with the subcommittee for alternative crisis response, that would be some good data for us to get back, especially around the mental health and youth, since we brought that up in our last subcommittee meeting. So would love to see that.
Of course, can do.
Councilmember Soni.
Thank you so much, Director. This was pretty detailed information. And continuing on the mental health, you mentioned there is King County levy that has actually helped us to procure some of these resources. Mm-hmm. However, I still feel, and I was doing some research as well on this, and outside my role of city as a council member, I have dealt with some of these scenarios. With all the support and that's been provided at the King County is not enough. And these are majority of time dealing with the situations that are a threat to life. And sometimes they are for a short term, and once people are out, there is no other plan that exists. They are just left on their own. So I definitely feel that as city, we should not just totally rely on what's being provided at a county level, because very soon we may lead into having systemic issues for our own city. If we read, almost 25% of our high schoolers are dealing with a depression, and 12% of them, they have committed suicide or doing that. So I definitely think mental health still needs to be prioritized, specifically even for our own city, rather than just relying on the county support that we are getting. So this is one of the areas, and maybe, I'm happy to set up some time with you one-on-one to discuss some of these things. So being very vocal about having mental health, I know these positions have been on hold for long. I definitely think it will be worthwhile for us to relook and find out what the gaps that are existing and if we need to prioritize this.
So I think probably the most prudent approach to doing that is letting the subcommittee do their work. Councilmember Procria is the chair of that subcommittee. Did I get that right?
Actually, it's Councilmember
Vice
Soni.
President.
Oh, you're the chair of the sub. I'm so sorry.
Council
I
Vice
think going through the subcommittee is probably the correct process. We had the tenant and protections and the subcommittee meeting at the same time. Sorry about that. That's probably the best route for us to do that. We did send out an email at the end of last week about how we plan to deploy the 3 positions that are on hold. And mental health and addressing mental health crisis is a component of the gap that will fill. And so happy to discuss that in the context of our subcommittee meetings.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before we go to further questions, I'm going to hop in because I have a couple clarifying questions on this as well. And I don't know if the email that was just referenced was sent to the whole council or just members of the subcommittee. Director Helen, this may lead to a question for the subcommittee, but I want to make sure I understand this piece of the presentation. So where we last left off at the beginning of the biennium, council had funded these positions to do work that then got put on hold while we waited for the subcommittee to have a chance to evaluate the King County services. So the 2 social workers for alternative crisis response, as well as the mental health professional, I'm hearing you now say that these are going to be hired. Is that correct?
That is correct. The plan is to have those hired and in place by the end of the year. It would be the community health manager position, which would directly supervise our homeless outreach team and provide cross-coordination across the departments of the whole community response program. And then there would be 1 community care coordinator to support the mental health professional co-responder. And there would also be 1 mental health professional to the added to the co-responder program with a focus on juvenile cases.
So thank you. That's helpful. I do think having a written memo on this could be helpful for the council to understand. If it wasn't already, if it was sent to the whole council and I missed it, I do apologize. Quickly here on the mental health professional with a focus on juvenile cases, is that in your department or in the police department?
That is a police co-response.
Okay.
And we can, I think, part of the plan of updating, reinitiating the subcommittee is basically to have these conversations, but also to share information. And then I think the plan is for the subcommittee to brief the council.
That could be. And so the subcommittee is working on coming back to the council, is my understanding, with their revised charter. So we do certainly need that update here shortly. But does anyone else have clarifying questions for the director before I move on from that? Councilmember Kritzer?
Yeah, thank you. I don't think that I received any information on that, so it might have been that it just went to the subcommittee.
Just went to the subcommittee at
Okay.
this point in time.
And great. Well, I just kind of want to add on here that I look forward to the subcommittee's work. I also look forward to us as a council having a conversation about this before, which I don't want to slow down the hiring since we are, over a year into the biennium of actually getting additional staffing. But I do think having a discussion about these positions, if they're different than they were envisioned, as a council coming back from the subcommittee would be helpful sooner than later.
Councilmember Forsyth.
I'll just share that you all are kind of getting a preview of what we talked about in the subcommittee meeting. So no decisions have been made from the subcommittee side. So you're just kind of getting a preview of the intro conversations that we had in our first meeting of the year.
Okay, thank you. And is the subcommittee bringing a revised charter forward for consideration?
I believe that was the plan. We need to meet again after we have.
Okay, that's great. All right, wonderful. Next question for the director. Councilmember Parsi, thanks so much.
Would you be able to share a little bit more about the development services team? It seems like the largest budget item, and I wanted to get a better understanding of what that group does.
Sure. So development services essentially includes all the staff that physically sit on the first and the second floor that are part of planning and community development. That is looking back at their roles and responsibilities. They do building permits and inspections. They also are responsible for code enforcement. We now have the 3 code enforcement officers. They do land use entitlements, which includes all your discretionary approvals like site plan entitlements, conditional use permits, the development agreements that have come before the council recently, as well as environmental review under the State Environmental Policy Act. They do civil engineering review, so when the site plan entitlement is done, then they actually ensure that the civil engineering that is the infrastructure from the building connects to the public infrastructure in a reasonable way, and I think that covers it. Yes.
Council Vice President.
Thank you. Director, you mentioned coming off of Dev Services where we have not seen a drop in permitting requests, permits being requested. However, our neighbors around, they have seen it. Do you have a theory? Is there a theory as to why we haven't seen that drop?
I don't. What these numbers indicate to me is that, you know, development is regional, and we all had to update our comprehensive plans at the same time. And so it's worth it for us to look at some of the housing policies that went into effect. Are there things that are creating barriers that our jurisdiction isn't seeing that other jurisdictions are? And we have been committed, as we said, when we updated the comprehensive plan, that we would come back with housing information for you to see if we were having any declines in permitting. So it's numbers that we're following very, very carefully, but we'll also coordinate with our planning directors in the other cities to see what they're seeing as well. Because as we know, development is kind of on the east side, is more of a regional ecosystem, so we want to understand what they're seeing and try and avoid any sort of risks that are creating problems for them.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Kritzer.
Following the development services thread here, curious if you can share, I know that you mentioned a little bit about the process improvement work, and we'll dig into that. And also, I know that I hear from folks who are working on developing housing and were engaged as part of this process. And can you give us a deeper update on where that's at and when we can expect more implementation on recommendations that come out of that?
Sure. So the matrix study essentially included 76 recommendations for changes that they thought we should consider as basically to be adhering to best practices from other jurisdictions. They did a current state assessment, they did a best practices assessment, and then they gave us those recommendations. There is a group of staff working on evaluating those recommendations now, and we'll be prioritizing them. And then with that also, they'll be evaluating kind of both. They fell into several categories, if memory serves me correctly, kind of tools, processes, training, and we'll be ranking all of those and creating a prioritization that you'll probably hear about in the next couple of months. as part of all of the transition conversation that's happening because of my retirement.
Well, thank you. And since you mentioned it, I do want to say, I just want to appreciate the work that you have done for our city. It's been really incredible. We've done so, as you pointed out, some of the amazing things that we have actually done just even in this biennium, but over the course of your tenure. So thank you so much. I will note that if we are going to have any conversations as we're looking forward, or especially around this department, and it affects the budget, I would hope that those types of things will be brought forward to us early for conversation as well. But just want to say thank you so much for all of your incredible work.
Thank you. Well, thank you to the team because they're pretty amazing. The staff at PCD are great.
Indeed. And I'm not going to talk about Director Helen's retirement yet because we don't have to yet. So I wanted to check in with Councilmember Procria. Did you have any first round questions? I know we're kind of...
I did have one. I wasn't sure whether to bring it up here or maybe one-on-one, but for a position like the mobility planner, I think that's the title, that's been funded, that's been funded relatively recently as we look at on page 10, the dollar amount actual versus what has been budgeted. We get sometimes correspondence, we take meetings where people share accessibility concerns and mobility concerns with us. And I understand that we're not allowed to interface, or it's not recommended that we directly interface with staffers, but how best do we communicate the concerns we hear from community with this staff member? Is this through you? Is this, is there some way to like scrape our emails and?
When you hear any of those, please feel free to send them to me or to either of the deputies in planning and community development, Jason Lynch or Seraphy Allen, because we're probably better at distributing the specific concern that's being raised to the right staff person. And we would hate to have you try and figure that out. So for us, it's just as easy to be the single point of contact so we can get it to the right person quickly so that we can get you a really quick answer.
Okay, fantastic. And not even just the answers, just we hear feedback all the time. Right? This is our job, is kind of be the ambassador from the public to the actual policy work going on in the city. And, you know, particularly for items where if somebody says, oh, I just want this sidewalk curb cut to be a little bit wider, things that maybe don't have the biggest monetary cost attached to them, just communicate that via email or just, okay.
Communicate that, you can communicate that to the three of us because, for instance, sometimes it's even a public works question. So it doesn't, so we can get it to another person without it. We can get it quickly to where it needs to go. And you can also remind any of the people you interface with, any of the constituents, that they can always put questions like that on Q Alert. So in the city system, and that actually also is a great way to distribute kind of feedback and questions to get an answer quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And just a pro tip, you can help residents complete their Q alerts. Just sit down with them and pull it up on your phone or your laptop even. I do see a few more hands. Councilmember Parsi?
Did I hear correctly that your department also kind of helps with interfacing the commissions?
Well, we do engagement with several boards and commissions. So we manage the Planning Commission, Human Services Commission, Ped Bike Commission, LTAC. And so we do a lot of that interface when we manage and you have joint meetings, for instance. Our staff generally support the Planning Commission, and you're going to have a Planning Commission joint meeting here coming up in the next month, I believe. So yes, from that regard, we do a lot of work with the boards and commissions.
Thank you. If we were to think about the possibility of potentially new commissions, would your department be a good resource to ask about how much it costs from a staffing perspective to support commissions?
I think that would be an executive department.
Executive. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Soni?
So this is tourism related. We know that now World Cup, this is just a month away. And there is a budget that has been put together for this one. So first question, don't know like, if the entire budget will be utilized or there will be something that's going to be remaining from there. My question is like, are there any activities that has been planned post World Cup as well for economic, development or any other activities that can help either our businesses or the communities that can be used for that purpose rather than, if there is a budget that has been left?
Right. So I will actually have the team that's coming to talk to you on May 19th answer that question, but we will have some continuity in operations beyond just World Cup, but some of those were obviously short-term, time-limited, and spending dedicated, but I'm sure they have ideas for some of that money. It was actually good to hear too, because they have been very successful in grant funding, in getting grant funding, and they've gotten over, I think, $380,000 in grants and other sponsorships for World Cup as well. So they're out there really hitting the sidewalks.
Thank you. Other questions, Council Vice President?
Thank you. Director, you had mentioned that lodging, we're seeing a decrease this past year, and we can guess at cost of fuel that's gone up, uncertainty, traveling. We are expecting the uptick with World Cup. Are there other influences that could be driving that down so that, when global events kind of simmer down, when things kind of start getting back to whatever a normal is, are we expecting it to recover, or are we expecting the uptick from World Cup to kind of buy us a little bit more time?
I actually think the uptake from World Cup will buy us a bit more time, and our staff are constantly working to leverage the investments that we make and ensure that we're gaining partnerships and learning lessons from what works and what doesn't work. And we'll be continuing activations that kind of started with World Cup as we start our district identification work. And so our district development work. So I think that will be an opportunity for us to try and support tourism and economic development kind of beyond the framework of World Cup.
All right, I believe that wraps up our conversation on the baseline budget for planning and community development. Thank you so much, Director Helen, for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it, and for your wonderful team.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Chief Flo. Online.
Good evening, Council. And Director Cochran, thank you for running a slideshow for us. If you can go ahead and start with the mission statement. So obviously the police department is here to provide law enforcement services to the community that reflect the core values of respect, professionalism, and dedication. The department is broken down into 4 divisions: patrol, investigation, support, and outreach. As far as our baseline budget in the last setup for 25-26, we had some internal movement of positions, both from criminal investigations and police dispatch and support. So the support side consists of our dispatchers and our records specialist, to include our public records specialist. And then our core function is our patrol response, and that are the women and men on the street that folks see that drive around in cars, respond to service, and conduct our initial investigations. Next slide. So in the last budget process, there were 4 additional commissioned FTEs authorized and a program coordinator. We continue in our recruitment and staffing efforts. I believe we are down to 4 vacant positions, so very close to being fully staffed, which will be phenomenal for us. We have not been fully staffed in quite some time. The program coordinator position is open in part due to a retirement. We did actually hire for that position, but we had a retirement of an employee with that same title. So we do have a vacant program coordinator position currently. And the next part in the capital and equipment or improvement process for those 4 officers that came with 4 police cars. That is in, I'll say, various stages of process as far as how cars are ordered, upfitted, et cetera, but those were allocated in the budget, and we've moved forward with acquiring those vehicles. The council had funded a gun buyback program, of which we did complete both of those programs. And then I will have an update for you as far as what the totals were, both for the number of guns removed from the community and the funds issued. We did not utilize all $50,000 of the money that was allocated, but unfortunately, I don't know the amount that remains. If this still remains a council priority in the next or in the upcoming budget, those funds can be moved forward, and this can become more of an ongoing type of process. For the next slide, the package 17. So the parking program manager position has been filled. The program manager has been working very diligently with the other departments to transition the parking enforcement function back to the city. It has been contracted out to a private entity for quite some time. We are working through the internal dynamics that are necessary to set up the systems and infrastructure for the city to actually be able to maintain that. And then what you'll see in the subsequent budget conversation will be the funding request for the actual staffing of the folks that will actually do the enforcement part or piece of it. In the interim time, we have extended the contract with the third-party provider, as well as shifted some of those responsibilities internally to both the program manager and to my traffic unit for parking enforcement. When we get to the dashboard measures, they remain relatively the same as I'll say throughout what we're looking at a 5-year time period. We're looking at a number of cases per detective, and then we're also looking at clearance rates internally versus the state average. As like I said, the performance measures for safe and resilient. For the next one, same thing. You can see it there for yourself as far as the violent and property crimes per year. When we look at it overall, we just released our annual report. Crime overall was down 26.9% last year. And so we're trending in the right direction. As I mentioned in our last quarterly update, we tend not to try and take credit completely for that, because there are a number of factors that go into crime rates, and crime is cyclical. So just as it's gone down, it generally will go back up at some other point. But when we look at our performance metrics, we meet the standards either based on state or national averages. At the bottom of the slide, there are some programs and systems that have been implemented since the last budget cycle. So we don't have, or we didn't have previous numbers to go by, but these are estimations of where we believe our performance will meet those particular marks. And as I mentioned, 26.9% decrease in crime. We've had over 2,300 DRONAS first response missions completed. We've talked about the public records requests, at over 2,100 of those being processed, which is an increase, and we've steadily seen an increase in that. From an evidence perspective, just or 2,600, almost 2,700 pieces of evidence processed, and that's both taking pieces of evidence in and also purging and or destroying evidence as appropriate. And then we've seen a 5% increase in traffic citations issued. And we finally were able to hire our MHP. So we have our MHP actively working in our co-response model, and we're looking, as you heard from Director Helen, looking to get some supplemental pieces to help with that for our overall Thrive program. So when we start looking at the challenges for the upcoming budget cycle or for the upcoming biennium, what we're seeing is increased costs for compliance, technology, and maintenance support. We've previously had the discussion about the increase in public records requests and the subsequent fees that are possible to go along with that. Recruitment, hiring, and retention remain an issue. As I said, we have 4 positions open right now, so we're doing well there, but we need to keep moving in that direction. I will mention again that unlike many other departments, to get a police applicant from application to functional officer on the street is about a 18-month process. What we're seeing also is increased complexity in our criminal investigations. Just about every investigation that we have involves some type of digital forensic component because everybody has a cell phone, computer, et cetera. So that adds a level and layer of complexity to our investigations. Clearly, we know, and it was just stated earlier, we have a mental health related issue, not just within our community, but within society as a whole. We see that as first responders. There continues to be increased legislative requirements for training. Many of these training requirements that come down from the state or from the Criminal Justice Training Center obviously are not funded by them, but we still have to incorporate that into the officers' I'll call it work year, and we do actually plan out a year, sometimes 2 in advance for the training for all of the mandated requirements that exist. Jail costs continue to increase in part because of that mental health aspect of it, because that requires, I'll say, a different level of housing. If you have individuals with a substance use disorder, that also requires a different level of specialized housing, which contributes to our overall cost as it relates to the jail part of piece. And then going back to the investigation part, real briefly, we are looking to bring on board a co-response type of program and model for domestic violence. While we had a tremendous decrease in overall crime, just about 50% of the assaults that have occurred in the city are domestic violence or intimate partner related. There is a organization or group called Project Be Free that has been working in South King County very successfully. They are looking to expand to the east side. We've had conversations with them and are looking to partner with them and bring them on board to support our domestic violence victim advocacy, et cetera. We've been having conversations or have included obviously the prosecutor's office and city attorney in these conversations as they also play a critical component in providing support and follow-up to our domestic violence victims. And with that, I'll take any questions the council may have.
Thank you. Are there questions from the council? Councilmember Parsi.
Thank you so much for sharing this update. It was really helpful to kind of better understand the state of our staff and kind of the learning about the 4 open positions that we heard. I am curious if kind of for the future, if there are opportunities for us to look at preventative community-oriented measures for kind of looking at staffing in that area. I would be very interested, both in terms of mental health support and in terms of drug or alcohol related issues for what we can do in terms of a preventative measure.
Okay. Yes. In part, Project Be Free, and then again in some subsequent conversations when we start talking about potential funding sources, there are a number of diversionary type options that may be available to us based upon some decisions that the council will have the opportunity to make, and we can look towards that. We have been also in conversations with the LEAD program, which is a like pre-arrest alternative. We have had a very successful community court program for quite some time. And again, we may have the ability to, I'll say, enhance or augment that like I said, depending upon some the decisions that will be coming before you soon.
Oh, I think it was Councilmember Procria and then Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you so much. This may be more of a question actually for finance. I know that we fund ongoing positions with ongoing money, but with every chart that I've seen on some ongoing position that we budget for and then we hire, there's kind of a phase lag between the budgeting and the hire, where the amount of money we spend is usually 40 to 50% less than what we budget for. And I'm just wondering, where does that remaining money go? Does that just become one-time money for the biennium? Does it go back into our reserves? What do we do with that? Because it seems to be consistent.
It does. It becomes part of our general fund surplus, and it rolls over to the next biennium as one-time money for new items.
And additionally, I believe in this biennium, Director Cochran, there was some prescriptive direction given for cost savings from salary regarding community stability, and that's what part of the funding was when we, in November, invested in community-based organizations who were supporting immigrant communities impacted by recent destabilizations coming from the federal government. So that was a conversation that the council gave direction on in this current budget.
That is
that fair?
correct. So I'll just kind of explain what we did. We, in the last biennium, added about 41 new positions, which was monumental for us and probably something we won't see again, but recognized that onboarding or hiring, recruitment of all of those positions at one time in the beginning of the biennium was not how we were going to be implementing those new ads. And so what we did is determined what is the phased approach we're going to take, and then what amount of money will that save us, knowing that we're not going to hire all of those people in the beginning or of the biennium, or even in some cases until the second year of the biennium. And that estimate was used to fund a transfer of $1.4 million for the use to support community needs out of our Housing and Human Services Fund.
I believe it was Councilmember Forsyth and then Councilmember Kreitzer.
Thank you. Chief, I would love to see some of that conversation around the DV support and the Project Be Free brought into our conversation on the alternative crisis response. So just like I said earlier with the Core Solace, I'd love to see some of that Be Free project brought into that conversation so that we can further dive into the data points there. So love to see that. And then on slide 4, I don't know if I just blinked too fast and I missed it, but the 32% change in the criminal investigation and the 7% change in police patrol, are those positions all, it looks like maybe 4 are completely new and the rest are all transfers from different areas? Can you just clarify that?
No, so in the second line of 4 transfer to criminal investigations, that was additional staff essentially from patrol that got transferred to criminal investigations. And then the 1 FTE added in the patrol dispatch support. That was a support FTE that was added in the last biennium. If I recall correctly, it was 4 commissioned police officers and 2 support staff members that were funded. And that was based on prior conversations with the then council as far as what the, if you want to call it expansion or the growth rate, of the police department. Kind of a historical context. At a point, we had hired, I believe it was 11 officers at one point, not this biennium, but the previous, and we realized that our maximum effective hiring rate is a maximum of 6 officers at any one time to ensure proper onboarding in the FTO program. So it wasn't 4 folks added. It was basically the 4 internal transfers. And then, like I said, 4 commissioned officers, to support folks were budgeted for last biennium.
Okay, appreciate the additional context. Can you, for additional clarity, are there new positions being added, looked at being added for the next biennium?
Yes.
How many?
That depends on conversations and decisions by the council. That there is a need for additional police officers based upon the growth of the city. I know this is not necessarily the conversation or the study session for that, but just briefly, if you look at the average number of police officers in Redmond compared to the population, compared to both the national average and the average of similarly sized cities, we are understaffed. So there will, for the foreseeable future, be asked for additional commissioned FTEs. And when we looked at it, from the perspective of for every for every 2 officers, there's 1 support position needed, either from a dispatch perspective or from a records perspective, because those 2 officers are generating work that has to be processed on the back end. And so typically I ask for support positions, and then we determine where those positions can best be filled. Do we need additional support for our telecommunicators, for the 911 and the other calls coming in, because we've seen about a 6% increase year over year for the volume of calls that are coming in, or do we need that support at that time period for the processing of paperwork, the body-worn camera, the redactions, and all of those types of things?
Okay, thank you. So we will brace ourselves for an ask later. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Kritzer?
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on the conversation we just had about the Community Stability Fund. I do think we have had it on our docket to revisit the amount that is actually still remaining for that and how we allocate that. So I just want to put in a request. I don't know if it goes in Public Safety, Human Services, or Planning and Public Works, but since we have our Planning Director here and Finance Director, I just wanted to plug that I think we have been pending a conversation back on the balance of that money, and would love to have that conversation.
Is there anything I can do to help facilitate that discussion, getting information or getting anything scheduled?
I think it would be helpful to know how much money does remain, especially because I think you had said that it was a bit of a moving target since it was based on the salary savings. But if we know now and we can look at that and look at what we spent and what we have left, I think that would be helpful. And then
I will double check for you, but I believe that the only allocation that I'm aware of is, I think, 200,000 that was used previously this year. So unless there's something else, I think you're probably about 1.2, but I'll double check for you.
Yeah, I think it was 250. So yeah, so there is probably over $1 million that this biennium we could look at allocating. So I think it'd be worth for us to make sure that we have that discussion soon. One quick question for the chief, following up on the DV co-responder, which appreciate that as an upcoming proposal. Would that, is some of the thinking on that to have the scope of training for that co-responder or skill set to be able to both to respond on kind of a suite of domestic violence cases, including sexual assault as well?
No, so Project Be Free is primarily for domestic violence co-response. Now, if there is some type of sexual assault, sexual violence in addition to, they may be there in the domestic violence capacity, but this would not be sexual assault related necessarily.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate the conversation on that. I would be interested in knowing some more about the data, especially also around the percentage of sexual assault cases and the kind of resources. We have heard some community feedback around our ability to respond and support survivors of sexual assault as well. And although we do have some great community-based organizations, I think this is another area that we might consider thinking about city resources on as well.
Thank you. Council Vice President and then Councilmember Procria.
Thank you. Chief, this information's been really great. I've got just a super fast question and then one that's a little bit more in depth. So with the super fast one, regarding the gun buyback, just a clarification. I heard, and I could have been mistaken, but I heard that we didn't have the numbers just yet on that. However, in the slide, I saw a number of 51,000 and some change where we had budgeted 50,000. So I just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah, so if I recall, the amount budgeted was 50,000. And like I said, we did do the two sessions or two buybacks. Yeah, I'm not sure what the 51,000 aspect is. I won't speculate, but I'll say this. I know that from the monies that we spend and the gift cards that we do have remaining balance from those gift cards. But when we looked at what the actual cost is to run back the program, I believe that's what the $51,500 number is, because this was the first time we had ever done it. So we didn't know what the actual cost was from, I'll say, from a staffing perspective to actually run the program. Since we've done both programs now, we now know how many staff, how much it's going to cost. So if this is a desire of the council moving forward, we can actually present to you an actual number, or we can break the number down to say, here's what the cost is to run the program, and then council can decide how much money they want to allocate for the actual buyback portion of it.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification and for running that experiment to see how it goes and how we can be more efficient going forward. My second question is a little bit more in depth around, and we might need to follow up on this, around the domestic violence resources. While having resources on the front end, and I mean the front end, like with the domestic violence victim is one thing. However, as I know I'm preaching to the choir here with you, Chief, a lot of the issue is on the back end with the prosecuting's office. So are we partnering with the prosecutor's office to where there actually is impact, of course, being resources there for the victim, but for the assaulter?
Yeah, so one of the aspects, one of the many aspects of the Project Be Free that I'll say I'm excited about and looking at is that it is a very comprehensive model, in the sense of they will respond once the officers secure the scene, and then they will provide services for the victim, family members, et cetera. And I would say where the rubber really meets the road is those wraparound and supportive services after stabilization. So after the initial court hearings, when there's time for protection orders, when there's time for all the court hearings, they have the staff and the support for the victim. They are a community-based organization, so they are also able to tap into other CBOs for any type of wraparound services that may be needed. The prosecutor's office and the city attorney have been involved in these initial conversations, and to ensure that it is a very thorough and comprehensive program for the city of Redmond and for the victims. As I mentioned earlier, they have been very successful both in Kent and Auburn. They've been up and running there for 2 years. They have expanded to the east side there in Newcastle. Bellevue is also looking at potentially bringing them on board in a phased-in approach. So they have a proven track record of providing comprehensive support and services to victims in the county.
Great. Thank you for that, Chief. My apologies. I wasn't as direct as I possibly should have been. I'm asking specifically about the prosecuting office, where the abuser on the back end is getting going to class and paying a fine, and then having it removed from their record. Meanwhile, the victim has, issues that are going to continue on for years. So while, yes, we definitely need to be there for the victim, then how do we stop it from happening in the beginning? Like preventative, of course, but then having something and working with prosecutor's office to where it's more than a fine in a class.
Right. So they do have some, I'll call it services for victims. But for the specific details on the prosecutor's office, I would be remiss to speak to that because that's really not my lane. I can just say that we are including them in the conversation to ensure that they have a voice and a seat at the table, and that the program does in fact meet, I'll say comprehensively all of the needs around, this dynamic, both for victim and perpetrator.
Great, thanks.
I'm going to jump in really quickly, just to follow up on the gun buyback program. I was the sponsor and proud to earn the support of my colleagues and the mayor to make sure we had that program in Redmond. It was never intended to be an ongoing program, Chief. So I believe that the numbers reflected here do reflect the staff time involved because those were very, very staff-heavy events. Really glad that we had them as an opportunity and could consider on a one-off basis funding them again, but just want to make sure that residents know that anyone who has an unwanted firearm can surrender them at the public safety building during normal business hours. So that's always available. Councilmember Procria.
Just to follow up on Councilmember Kritzer's comment on the, blanking on the name, community.
Stability dollars.
Stability funding dollars. I have 10 minutes free and my committee next week. I just had agenda setting today in case that's something council is interested in touching base on. I'm sure I could work with Director Cochran to put that on the agenda if folks are interested. Cool. Okay, I will go ahead and do that.
There is, I will just say, on behalf of just how it works on the back end is I invite Director Cochran to take up the opportunity to do so. And maybe we have just a really light touch in terms of the paperwork. Basically, the deadline to have all the paperwork that supports our agenda setting is due by tomorrow. So really appreciate you making the offer. I hope we can make that work, Director Cochran, just to have a quick check on it, but also understand that you are already at work at 9:30 at night on a Tuesday, and tomorrow comes really soon.
I will be out of the office, but I will work with my staff to make sure that we get time assigned and something turned into a reserve spot.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate that. Did Councilmember Kritzer, did you have the next question? No. Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. I know we're not at the asks part, but since it was brought up around the gun buyback program, I look forward to the potential conversation for council to entertain that being an ongoing program.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions on the baseline budget for the police department? All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here, Chief. And thank you so much, Director Cochran.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
all for your time and attention during all of these presentations. I just want to ask that you take a moment to jot down what you liked, what you didn't like, where you felt like there was gaps or too much time spent. It's really how we identify improvements for the next budget cycle. These presentations were a new add to the process in the last biennium, and council's feedback helped us to add additional materials and also change the method of the presentations, kind of dispersing them over several months. So by the time we get to asking you for feedback, this is long ago. So if you have a moment to either share your thoughts now or just jot something down, that would be greatly appreciated, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. With that, council, is there interest in a short break? Yes. We will be in recess until 9:40. Thank you so much. Thank you. We are back, and the next item on the agenda is council's continued conversation on the budget and policy matrix from our most recent retreat. Council members do have the updated materials that were distributed last week. We have two matrices. The first is related to the budget items. The second is related to the policy items. We had a bit of a warm-up to this conversation at Council Talk Time 2 weeks ago, and we're back today with this high-level look to help make sure that the council is clear on our next steps, particularly with the items that you would like to send council leadership back to the administration with in our partnership to make sure priorities are understood as the preliminary budget is being crafted. There's a lot of conversation we could have here tonight, but we'll kick it off by checking in with folks on how do the materials look as they currently stand. After the retreat, a matrix was prepared by our legislative coordinator at the time. Staff provided feedback, and the high level you have in front of you does not include all of the staff comments, but you all do have those. And as you can see on the budget matrix, there are a few items that are already in progress to some degree. There are some conversations to advance to the preliminary budget and a few that need further discussion as a result of either our questions or questions back from the staff. So particularly for those higher ranked items, would love to open it up to comments and questions. Councilmember Kritzer.
I'll just call out a few things here. I think in terms of the, it shows up as housing navigation services, which I think was the housing ombuds position that showed up in tier 1. I see it under needs discussion. I did want to note that part of one of the things that the tenant protection subcommittee is working on is actually having conversations with staff about a potential kind of scoping out of what that budget proposal would look like. So it would be helpful to know if generally that is of interest to the council for us to come back with that. I thought from our last conversation that was in scope, but I do want to get clarification from folks on that. I do also note that in the staff feedback on that, there's discussion of a housing stability coordinator. Would love to get a little bit more detail on that position, since I'm not sure we've heard that much about a housing stability coordinator. So far, some of the discussion we've had is actually that we might be looking at as part of scope is whether we actually do that. We would fund that if we were going to fund more funding in-house or maybe to contract for that type of support. So actually, I'll just stop talking here and ask, generally thumbs up for us on that one, if it is in tier 1, to be working with staff to bring that back and knowing that if that is a priority for the council.
Yeah, any, before we call for thumbs, are there any comments on whether or not that is understood to be in scope for the subcommittee? And as you'll see, some time has passed, so some updates are there. Any comments or questions on that? Councilmember Parsi?
I had a question. I was curious if this item is mostly staff auxiliary support, or is it, for example, a live place where people can go and see right now there's 3 vacancies here, here, and here, and you can sign up. And this is how easy it is to do that, and kind of there's no person that you have to reach out to, because the moment you put someone in the middle, there's a barrier that you introduce to kind of seeing availability, translation, all the things that people would need. So that's kind of where my vision was, but I just wanted to make sure we're at least talking about the same thing.
Go ahead, Councilmember Kritzer.
Yeah, I think the idea was actually, it was more of a staff person or a contract person. I think the first thing that they would be doing would be responding to tenants who have questions about issues around tenant protections, renters' rights, et cetera. I had also proposed as part of this that they may be also to help folks with navigating through finding affordable housing. It's not meant to be like a technical platform. Those platforms are out there, but how to use the platforms. I think part of the scope that we'll talk about in committee is whether it makes sense to just have a focus on kind of the ombuds piece of responding to resident concerns about housing issues, or whether there's kind of that navigation piece as well.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm not hearing any objection to essentially moving this housing navigation services, which the Tenant Protection Subcommittee currently has included in its charter. So kind of moving that closer to the middle column there as part of council's priorities for investigation. Thank you, appreciate that. Did you have an additional comment, Councilmember Kritzer? I know you kind of paused to get feedback on that one.
Sure, I'll just do one other that's also in the top. That was one that I had proposed, which was the CIP outdoor play and move outdoors outside project. I will note I appreciated the staff feedback on this and the proposal to put it in a later part of the CIP. My hope would be, because this I think was very highly ranked by the council, that we could allocate some money to actually do some investments in the upcoming 2 years of the CIP to add some infrastructure. And would be happy to follow up on that with anyone else kind of in advance of the budget and talking with the Parks Director about this. But it's already in the column, I would love it to be. So I'm not suggesting we move it in this matrix, but I just wanted to highlight that as responding to feedback from the staff.
Understood, thank you. Councilmember Procria.
Thank you, and I'm sorry if you already covered this, but I'm just wondering about the item in Tier 3 of the policy items, reducing barriers to public participation via childcare access, that is also in Tier 1 marked with a star of the budget matrix. What is the rationale behind the tier switch?
Those were different things. So on the budget matrix Tier 1, that is separate, that has an asterisk in it, which at the bottom it indicates that this was on the policy item or on the policy matrix, and that's where staff responded to it. Council leadership moved it here for clarification because this actually is a budget request. So this one on the budget matrix Tier 1, pooled childcare resource to reduce barriers to council service. This was our discussion, which was highly rated in the room, to create a resource as we implement Redmond 2050, reducing barriers to becoming a council member and serving, the city. So we discussed having a pooled childcare resource. This wouldn't be a resource that is automatically given to every single council member, but like our neighboring cities, creating a few $1,000s that could be used to reimburse for council members who need childcare during the course of their council service. The item on the policy matrix that is down on Tier 3 was more about reducing barriers to public participation by providing childcare at various community events and community meetings and things like that, was my understanding of that other item.
I see, okay, so we kind of just said this is like a separate budget item and it was highly rated.
They were proposed by different sponsors in the room and ended up in different places on the matrix.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Good question. Councilmember Forsyth.
Looking at the, on the budget side and the planning, it's in Tier 3 is the parking and downtown activation management. I know there's a lot going on in this, but I wanted to flag it because I don't want community to think that this is a lower priority for us. There's actually work happening in this space. So just kind of wanted to call that out, that this is not a low priority for us.
Sure, absolutely. And I would say, oh, and you reminded me of something really important. Yeah, thank you. This is just a reflection of our point in time and of that one conversation that we were having. I think a lot of the new council members might also be having an experience of this was a few months ago and the learning curve that we've all experienced in the last couple of months. We have a better understanding. But if something is in the it was placed in the it's in progress and we want to talk more about that, we certainly should. I see that Mayor Bernie is no longer on the call with us, but I did want to let everyone know that in addition to all of this, before we even started the exercise, one of the things that Mayor Bernie shared at the retreat was that council's interest in having a Redmond 101 style civic engagement program is something that she suggested that we could work on this year, and she and I had a conversation yesterday that indicated work is underway for that one. So that's not represented in this matrix, but I know has been something that the council and community have been interested in for a really long time. So it's on its way as well. Councilmember Kritzer.
I just wanted to follow up on just a couple different childcare related items, and wanted to follow up as well on the comment Councilmember Precria made. I think, and also my thoughts in terms of the item that's showing up right now in Tier 1, which I think is an interesting one. I'm not sure. And I'll say, as a council member who has young children at the moment, I think I'm happy if we want to spend some time to think about what this looks like and be able to kind of set our council up for the future on this one. And I guess one thing that I might prioritize even more on childcare that I think it didn't quite get captured in here, but I see it kind of in the notes of a proposal, would be actually looking at ways to support childcare access in our communities. I think especially given what we were discussing tonight about the past state legislative session where we saw over $100 million in childcare subsidies for our working families cut. It might be something for us to look at as whether we might be able to support childcare subsidies in our city. I don't know whether that's feasible or not, but I would be interested in that conversation. I know some of our neighboring cities are looking at that at this moment, and whether we might be able to contribute towards that might also be something that I would move up in priority.
Thank you. I can't tell who was next, but I don't think Councilmember Soni has spoken yet. So Councilmember Soni.
So I don't see in the Tier 3 the pregnancy crisis centers anywhere in this matrix. Or is that covered somewhere else?
Good question. If it's not on here, it is on the larger matrix with the more detailed response from staff. I believe the response from staff on the legal question is had some nuance around how King County requires those types of businesses to do certain notifications, but the full answer is in the more detailed matrix. But at a quick scan, you're right, I'm not seeing it here. Happy to add it once we identify where it goes. Yeah. Councilmember Parsi, did you have your hand?
Is this a good time to talk about the items in the need discussion column?
Sure, particularly the ones that you might want to see advance to this middle column so that Council Vice President Nueva Camina and I have the direction from the council.
Yeah. So one of the items that I'm looking at is open data dashboards. Specifically, I'm looking at it with a lens of finance, so we can make sure that we can publish our kind of data sets well. And then my hope is that if there's opportunity that that program can reduce the public records requests, that would be something that I would be delighted to know if that could be kind of helping us towards that cost-saving goal by proactively publishing data. So that's one. And then with the temperature reduction program, I did hear from a resident that asked if we have opportunities to paint, to kind of do any regulations with the color of buildings, and if we can kind of steer towards lighter colors. So I would love to see what we can do in terms of planning and every other thing that kind of is available, but specifically with planning and building regulations to see what we can do with temperature reduction efforts.
Great, thanks for providing more context. Councilmember Precria.
See, one thing I'm learning about the job is that everything can be analyzed in the framework of a budget. And we just got through a presentation where we saw, like, for example, a $50,000 budgetary dollar sign amount put next to, like, the gun buyback program. And for example, for the two, like, youth youth-focused action needed items for the policy matrix tier 1. Youth representation on all commissions, strengthen relationship between a council and RIPAC. I feel like there would be like a staff time $ amount put next to either of those. Is that understanding correct? So is this something that we also, if it is in our tier 1, if it is something council is interested in moving forward on, the council leadership would have to work to put in our preliminary budget, even though it is in the policy side for this?
So really great question. And just to know that council leadership, we're like the project managers of it all, but like we, the council, work together, right? But no, the kind of expense that you're discussing doesn't necessarily come out of the budget to manage the council. Would be part of, like, say, if we're talking about having youth representation, like was recently recruited for on the planning commission, that's the planning staff taking the time and investing the time to do that recruitment and offer support to that individual and all of that. So it ultimately falls in that department's budget of time and resources. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I mean, I guess.
Go ahead and ask it again.
Okay, just very tangibly, for something like the CIP outdoor play project, the next steps seem very tangible where as we work to create the budget, we say, okay, we want this, we want some money allocated towards this, some CIP dollars allocated towards this. But what is the equivalent for like the youth focused thing? Do we just tell staff that, hey, we want to make sure, we tell like the planning commission, we tell the planning staff that we want the planning commission to have a youth member? Like they already have, we tell the park staff we want the Parks Commission.
Yeah,
What
so
is the
this youth representation on all
equivalent?
commissions? We're really, really close, but council leadership meets bi-monthly with the administration. We would bring that to our monthly meeting to check in, or twice a month, actually, we meet with her, so, and her staff, so we'll check in on that one if that's a priority of the council. In the one with RIPAC, there was information in the matrix that seemed to say, actually, everybody wants this, including RIPAC, so it's actually just a scheduling issue. So again, council leadership does agenda setting twice a month, and we would get going on that if that's the direction of the council.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Kritzer and then Councilmember Forsyth.
Just a follow-up on that. Specifically, I think if we did want to talk about kind of elevating specifically with RIPAC, because I know kind of some of the discussion started with, should we have a teen council? And then we said, well, we actually have, in a lot of ways, a teen council RIPAC, but we don't always kind of leverage RIPAC in the way that other cities do to give input on what council's doing. So I do wonder, in terms of just like park staffing time, if we were going to have RIPAC do different activities or more engagement than they usually do, if there is like a moderate budget ask or like a certain amount of some staff members' time we would want to allocate. Even I think about, when we decided we wanted to do the dog parks and community gardens projects, that also took like a chunk of staff time as part of the budgeting in addition to like the capital costs for that. So I think that could be, just kind of to respond to Councilmember Precaria's point, I feel like that might be something that we could convey.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would imagine is, I think the idea of having a second council for youth has, at the moment, was not prioritized by the current makeup of the council. Strengthening this relationship was the thing that was prioritized. So probably what we should do is get in a room with RIPAC and sit down and have a conversation about what is the most meaningful relationship moving forward, and then be able to ask that question about the budget implications from there. Okay. We can do that. Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. I've kind of gone through and circled the ones that I'm interested in discussing more, so I don't know if that's going to be helpful to just flag them that way. The study on living wage is definitely still a top priority for me, I think, especially given everything that we heard tonight earlier with what's coming down the pipe. And then I'm still interested in the Adopt a Street program, and maybe that's just me having a conversation with appropriate staff around the research I did previously on that, talking with the Kirkland staff member. Would love to see if other folks are still interested in that. And then the Housing Stability Fund, as we talked about earlier tonight, I feel like because of the additional context we heard today, that for me, that raises above a tier 3. So I'm interested to see if other folks feel the same way. And then interested in working on the night lighting impact for wildlife with Councilmember Kritzer and Councilmember Parsi, if there's space to work with that. And then I think we can go ahead and take the fines for impersonation of officers. That was one of my suggestions, because I did just look at what was passed in state law, and it covers, the fine used to be $500 and now it's $5,000. So I think we can go ahead and remove that one.
Awesome. So let's take them one at a time. So the study on living wage, the reason that we placed it in the needs discussion column is just because of some of the questions that came back from staff on the matrix there. So I do think it's worth being really clear on like what the ask is for that study. So if we could articulate that a little bit better and have a conversation, that'd be helpful. Do you have a comment on that topic, Councilmember Parsi? Okay, Council Vice President?
Thank you. That was one of the just handful of things that I had brought forward at the retreat, was knowing that we continue to deal with, I'll call it localized inflation, where the cost of living is going up very, very quickly here in Redmond. We already know that. What I don't know, and we've seen this at the county level where other jurisdictions, other municipalities have increased their minimum wage, knowing that there can be unintentional consequences of doing that, and wanting to see some data so that before we did something that was, with all good intention, end up creating further issues that we don't want to do. So just doing a study on what a living wage for Redmond would look like, and whether or not increasing our minimum wage would be a viable option, or if that would be more detrimental.
Councilmember Forsyth, yeah.
On that same topic, we've heard from staff in the past when we've brought this up that most businesses in Redmond already pay above the minimum wage, but we've not actually seen any data. So if we have any data around that, that would be helpful too.
Councilmember Kritzer?
Just responding on the open data dashboards and what we actually saw in the response from staff, I'm wondering if this falls more in the already.
I'm so sorry, Councilmember Kritzer. We have a 3-list item that we're working through over here. Can we circle back to you?
Sorry, I thought we were done with that.
So, nope, we're still on the first one of the 3. So sorry about that. So the study of the living wage, I'm hearing kind of a couple of different things. Requesting data that may exist, the data may not exist, and that may need to be what's studied. Is that part of the scope of a study funded through one-time dollars that council is interested in? And at this point, maybe we should use our majority kind of, is there a majority of council that would like to see a scoping similar to that and see this moved to the preliminary budget column in the middle of the table? Councilmember Parsi?
I think before kind of taking a vote for like a specific item, I think I would like to see kind of the cost for each of these things, because for example, maybe I say yes to this because it sounds really great, but then it costs a whole lot more than it's like, it means that we can't do 5 other things. So I feel like voting on just one item without having that holistic perspective is a little bit difficult, and I don't feel comfortable to do that.
Okay, I appreciate the feedback and understand that it's a tough spot. So we'll look to solve for that, but would like to get clarity on this one, what the answer to the council, or excuse me, to the staff question in the matrix could be, if it's an idea we want to continue to discuss. Appreciate the feedback. Councilmember Kritzer.
I think on the living wage study, just listening to what everyone's saying, maybe there's a step before we fund a formal study or figure out whatever the dollar value would be to just see what we actually have as information already, as well as what we could source from looking at, say, King County's ordinance that they had passed, increasing the minimum wage, and if there's any data that they also collected or any things that we can get that's already available. But I would say that I'm in general in support of including a study if we don't feel that there's sufficient information, and we want to be thoughtful about that.
Okay, and it's a good reminder too that typically the lists that come out of our council retreat, they are living documents. So at the moment, it almost sounds like this one is a staying in the needs discussion, and we'll do a little asking of staff for some additional data and potentially looking at King County data if we can get our hands on it, but maybe it's staying there. Did I hear that correctly? Is that okay? Okay, cool, we'll leave it there. Okay, so the next one was the Volunteer Adopt a Street program. Any thoughts on that one? Councilmember Parsi?
I think I don't remember if I was the person who wrote it, but I had some thoughts on it. There are cities that do a really good job besides adopting a specific street. So for example, Sammamish allows people to adopt a stormwater pond. So there is a lot of different adopt a something program that are more than just cleaning. It's about kind of like taking ownership of the land. And I think if this can be expanded beyond kind of cleaning a street, I would be more in favor of it if we can kind of expand that scope.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. And the city does have the Adopt a Storm Drain program that is, last I heard, completely full.
Not what I'm thinking. That one is just cleaning the leaves out of the storm pipes. This is more about like doing restoration work.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. Other thoughts on the Adopt a Street program?
What row is it?
Currently on the visual graphic we have for tonight, it's on the budget tier 2 needs discussion. Yeah, you bet. Councilmember Kritzer.
I have heard over the years a lot of people say that they would support something like this. So, and I think I would support finding out, because I see budget request estimate is like 10K question mark. I'd support finding out how much it is. If it's $10,000 to pilot it, you know, that seems like I would support adding that into the budget request column, but it'd be good to know how much it actually might cost to implement.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I will say I tend to agree that it's worth sending council leadership in to ask a couple more questions on this one. We do know that we have a high demand for volunteerism in the city. We didn't talk about it too much, but the most recent volunteer fair had huge turnout. And if Redmond 101 kicks off, we'll have all kinds of folks eager to be engaged in one way or another. So if there are no objections, we'll go ahead and add that one to the list in the middle. Yeah, Councilmember Soni?
I just want some more clarity on this one. Maybe I am not aware. So when somebody is adopting a stormwater or a road, they are responsible for the maintenance of that. Are they also responsible? So who pays for these things? Like, because I've seen a lot of signage that had said like this has been adopted. So if somebody can just explain me.
Sure, Councilmember Forsyth?
Sure. So Kirkland has this program, and I've talked to their staff about it. It ends up being, once the program is stood up, it ends up being a fairly low maintenance type of program, because it's really just a group of community members that care, and they adopt a stretch of road, and they commit to picking up litter 2 or 3 times a year. And the expense to the city is the staffing person that coordinates, garbage bags, orange vests, grabbers, gloves, and that's about it. So it's really about keeping the streets clean, and it's a way for community members to feel a sense of ownership and of giving back, but it's not a big overall maintenance lift for our community to have to try to like work on our streets. It's really about keeping the environment clean.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think maybe one of the questions that council leadership could ask staff is about the staff capacity, which has been growing over the last few years, certainly in volunteerism in the city, but we can work on that if that's the direction of the council. Okay, great. So the third one from Councilmember Forsyth, and then we can go back to the data dashboards question over here, was the housing stability funding. And, truthfully, I don't remember what that is from the, that might be the money we were just talking about. Is that what it is? The money we were just talking about? So is it in the wrong column? Should we move it to the already in progress? Does that sound correct? Okay, cool. That one was easy. All right, Councilmember Kritzer, would you like to come back to the data dashboards?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if that one is in the wrong column, because from reading it, it sounds like the staff is looking at this. So is it in the already in progress column?
Do others agree?
Yeah, I don't know if others interpreted the explanation on that.
Who would like to be recognized? The question on the floor is it in the wrong column? Should the open data dashboards, because we do have a lot of dashboards currently available, and there was staff response. Council Vice President.
Thank you. This was not one of my items. However, I recall when this was brought up, we acknowledged that there were open data dashboards, but I wish I could remember who brought it up, but somebody wanted more data, more dashboards, so that there was increased transparency. Wonderful. So that was Councilmember Parsi.
Okay. And Councilmember Parsi, do you have a reflection on the staff response in the matrix?
Yeah, so this is not exactly a dashboard that I'm asking about. This is more about publishing our raw data so people can so people can use that data for innovation purposes, for understanding the city, for accountability, and so many other kind of reasons. This is not about creating another shiny dashboard, and this is about just publishing data directly, like a data set. Here's an Excel sheet of our data that shows kind of our financial standing and things like that. So that's kind of what this represents.
Thank you. And the response that was in the staff comments, did it accurately respond to what you had suggested, or was there something lost in translation that maybe we need to circle back with?
I will take a look at the staff.
Okay, great. Other comments? I'll quickly say that Mayor Bernie and I also discussed in the middle of the page here the intention to have an RFA study, and we have heard the previews thanks to the motivated prodding of Councilmember Procria that we do know that investments in deferred maintenance for roads and sidewalks and ADA ramps is also a conversation forthcoming. So we are looking forward to that. How about, I'd like to draw the council attention to the policy matrix, the recognition of holidays, celebration, and community diversity. Is that a body of work that the council would like to revisit? We've had a little bit of conversation, and council received communication from the mayor's office on how the proclamation process is currently running. We've recently had some community feedback on this. Just wanted to see if there's any reflections on that one. Councilmember Parsi.
So I appreciate the mayor's perspective and kind of putting religious holidays aside, but I think there is a lot of other non-religious holidays that the city can acknowledge and celebrate. For example, one of the holidays that I previously shared too close to the deadline was celebrating spring, which is done by 11 countries, and I think it would be towards our goals to be an inclusive community, to celebrate and involve the community and kind of celebrate those holidays with our community, and bring everybody together. I would like to see this move forward and put some effort into celebrating holidays.
Thank you. Councilmember Kritzer.
I think in terms of what the ask here would be to just have some time this year, to have some study session time to discuss this. And I think specifically to align on how we might set as council if we want to recognize something. Because I think we've had a lot of discussion about how it's in the mayor's purview to proclaim things, and that's in her role and responsibility. But we may have other ways that we want to recognize, and we may want to just have that conversation. Possibly we do that collaboratively, or we say, this is the way that the council is going to be recognizing a set of holidays, and also to have the conversation about what are the parameters that we would want to see. It may be that we come up with those and we convey those to the mayor. She uses them for proclamations, or maybe we come up with an additional way that we recognize things.
Councilmember Forsyth?
Adding on to the conversation, I think it would be important for council to have that conversation too with our READY program managers.
Great. So if there are no objections, what I'm writing down for council leadership is to look to schedule time, include staff, include the mayor, and we will look for time. Also, this is one of those, like, we're at the stage of the year where we're always looking for 20 to 30 minutes. So, of course, our wonderful chairs, as was demonstrated earlier today, if you do find yourself with a committee agenda that would have a little bit of space, let us know. Give us a heads up. We'll be looking for it. Councilmember Procria, thanks.
Thank you. Want to bring our attention to Tier 2 needs discussion, the item tech innovation, which I think this was brought by me, and tech innovation could literally mean anything.
This was absolutely the smallest characterization of that beautiful speech that you gave at our retreat. So would love to hear what you have to say.
I'm surprised that's still remembered. But yeah, I think the general idea behind that largely was because of the rate at which technology is progressing, to fund some type of study to look at how we can use new and emerging tech to make city operations more efficient and serve more people in our diverse community in the next biennium. So I would love to just, it was a really loose collection of thoughts that kind of led me to give that speech. But I don't even know how much like a study would cost, right? So I kind of would love a little bit of staff time, almost like a study to fund a study, like just get some kind of an idea on the dollar sign amount behind that. And then we can kind of decide whether we think this is worth it or not. But kind of move that to like the advanced to preliminary budget, not putting it in the budget, but just getting like some kind of dollar sign amount attached to that, if that's something a council would be interested in.
My microphone's not on. Appreciate the question. What I might suggest, so that you have something a little bit more tangible for us to respond to, is if you haven't yet, I know we've just been reviewing baseline budgets thus far, but if you have a chance to meet with the director to understand what are some of the things that might already be on the table in terms of service enhancements that they're planning to propose, I wonder if you've had a chance to have that conversation yet.
I've had a brief conversation, and you're right, I'll probably circle back and have that conversation, come back with some more tangible things. But
okay.
I'm not trying to fund necessarily like a specific service enhancement, like we need to go do more language translation services or something like that. I'm kind of trying to do the meta thing, which is like fund a study to see what can we actually do.
Yeah, I heard, yes, I did hear you on the one-time-ness of it all. And yeah, so let us know what you come up with, because I think what I remember is it was a really compelling speech. So look forward to hearing what you learn and maybe what you're able to bring back. Does that sound okay for folks? Okay. Any other thoughts on this review today? I see more hands across the table. Councilmember Parsi.
For Tier 3 policy, the bottom one, equitable fees and income-based fee structure, the staff said, please clarify the structure fee. The thought process behind this is if the fee is the same for, say, a parking ticket for everybody who gets the parking ticket, regardless of their income, that sounds a little bit like a regressive fee structure. Many other countries have income-based consideration for fees, and maybe tickets rather than fees, but that's the kind of thought process behind it.
Thanks for sharing. And that's, there's a relationship there to our fee-for-service policy that we use, say, in the Parks Department. Councilmember Kritzer.
I'll just note on, in the policy section, in Tier 2 under discussion is the moratoria or ban on detention centers. And I know that some of our neighboring jurisdictions have done so in recent times. So I would just say that one could be one that maybe could just go through as like a hopper item. If anyone wanted to work on that, to be able to adapt from other jurisdictions, if we just wanted to put that in place as an additional support for our community at this time.
Great, good suggestion. All right, Council Vice President, how are we feeling about the direction from the team?
I feel like we have gotten a lot of clarity on things that we needed discussion on. I feel like we're in a good position to talk to the mayor.
Great. How about everyone else? Other thoughts, loops you want to close? Councilmember Forsyth?
Just real quick, on the equitable fees, just some clarity. Is that more around tickets? Councilmember, see if I may through the chair.
You may.
Thank you. The equitable fees and income-based fee structure, is that mostly, were you mostly thinking about parking tickets, speeding tickets, or were you thinking in a broader sense?
Both fees and tickets.
Fees. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I wanted to add, we do for tickets, at least in the school zones conversation, we did add in anyone who's on any sort of state service can get a reduction. So we do have that there, but I just wanted to see the scope. Thanks.
Great. Well, from here, we will distribute an updated version of this living document, and council leadership will be scheduling time with the administration to just kind of check in here at the beginning. Obviously, the mayor was in the room with us at the retreat and was able to hear all of these ideas firsthand as well. And then this, again, is a living document, so things that need discussion or might need to be having next steps on it. Traditionally, at the last few cycles, what we've done is had this and we check in on it occasionally, and some things end up coming through the hopper, especially if they're not things that are going to end up in the budget as a result of other work already happening. Any final comments or questions or things that would be helpful in that regard? Councilmember Soni.
Today I had my agenda setting for PES. There is a grant that we are applying for engaging youth for the climate actions. So it may not be directly tied with the youth representation on the different councils, but it somewhere sit between the environment sustainability and the youth representation there. So I'm just bringing this right now because we'll definitely be discussing then in the committee of the whole, but I'm just bringing this up because there's a part of what that's going to happen with the youth involvement in some of these.
Cool. Look forward to hearing more about it. Awesome. Thank you. Are we ready to move on to council talk time? Is everybody ready? Okay, wonderful. Well, just really quickly, the one item that council leadership wanted to make sure that we had a chance to connect on today was the role of the legislative coordinator. That role is in transition at the moment, and it has not yet been posted. One of the conversations that we've been looking for time to have as a council is about any feedback on the role and how it serves the council, and particularly, there's been quite a lot of conversation over the last couple of years, and maybe it didn't happen yet because of a way I voted in the past, but here I am opening it back up. So sometimes that happens. But the role of the ombud and the way that our ombud structure currently operates, I think there's a little bit of interest in exploring whether some of the, particularly the customer service pieces that are coming through the ombud right now, whether the legislative coordinator could eventually take on a greater share of that work, if that's of interest to the council. So I realize a few folks haven't even had a chance to be ombud yet for the very first time, but that's kind of the conversation that we wanted to open up. We're really hopeful as council leadership to be able to give direction for staff on rehiring for that role so that the council can get its support systems back in that particular regard. Any comments or questions? I saw here and then here. So Councilmember Kritzer.
Thank you. I know you attached the most recent document that we had worked on previously around the council ombudsperson process. And at that time, we had been envisioning trying to move more of the work to kind of our legislative coordinator and in that like legislative assistant role. And I would think in terms of who we might seek, it might be someone who's done constituent relations, who would be able to do that interfacing so that they could help us to really develop thoughtful responses. I think if we end up hiring that person with that skill set, I'd also would be open, or I'd be up for having more discussion on this ombudsperson process to discuss how much of that work really should be done by that person, including kind of which the criteria around which things get responded to by a council-related resource, whether it's a council member or the legislative coordinator versus like the mayor's office, for example. So you can see in here what we proposed. I would love to revisit this document with this council and just get some clarity on it. I think we got part way and then we kind of paused on it. So would be good with this group to revisit that as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Prakriya.
Thank you. I would also second what Councilmember Kritzer said. Just the first thought that sprung to mind for me was that Redmond is roughly 20% smaller than the size of a Seattle City Council district. So I would assume commensurate to that, the amount of constituent relations is probably proportional, and I know they have dedicated legislative assistants to do that work. I think it could be very helpful if we make that part of the role too.
Appreciate the math on that. Hadn't thought of that perspective. Thank you. Other thoughts, questions? I'll share really quickly, and Council Vice President may also have some additional context, but we had a conversation recently with staff regarding this position. Those of us who've been around for a while, we know that this position has been a little bit we would love to have someone long-term. And there is just kind of a sweet spot in hiring for both someone who can support the administrative day-to-day of, managing our calendars, being awesome at communications with constituents, and also supporting, like, say, if we were going to have a piece of legislation proposed on the detention centers, like basically having someone who can take that and run with it and write us the first draft and be ready to go. So that's kind of the balance of the skill sets that we will aim once again to make sure that we can bring to the team. So we'll do our best. Do you have any other comments, Council Vice President?
No, I think that you covered it pretty well.
Okay. Councilmember Forsyth.
Just reflecting in this exact moment on the past several years of this role, were you able to get any information on data on time spent and how much time was actually spent working for council members versus the other aspects of the role of split time between admin and council? I think that's where the tension point lives, and it'd be interesting, even if it's just council leadership reviewing that and figuring out workload-wise it feels like there's enough for a dedicated person for council, so I'm just going to advocate for that.
I do appreciate that. Data, no. Strong conversation, yes. And potentially a path forward on how council leadership, especially at the beginning, can help establish a pattern that's going to be supportive for everyone. Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah, Councilmember Kritzer.
Just a follow-up on that, because technically it is budgeted as now a full FTE that is supposed to be doing the work for the council. And if that is not going to be the case, then I think that we should advocate to not have that full amount in the council budget. It should be in the executive office. So, but I would love to have the full amount in the council budget and to have them working full-time for the council.
Great. Other final comments before we open it up for the rest of talk time? All right, appreciate your patience, everyone. Oh, it is 10:30, but we are technically still in talk time, so we can stay in talk time as long as you would like to stay in talk time, but it is 10:30, and our rules do say that we don't start any new agenda items after 10:30, but we were already in talk time, so thank you so much, everyone. Councilmember Forsyth, go ahead.
Real quick, tomorrow is Bike Everywhere Day, so if you are up for it and biking everywhere, there's a lot of morning events going on. We're living our Redmond values, and there are 6 station stops in Redmond. I will put the link to the map in the chat. There are 3 in Kirkland, 1 in Bellevue, one along 520. So if you're biking on the east side, there are plenty of opportunities to stop and get some swag and enjoy Bike to Work Month or Bike Everywhere Month.
Thank you. That is awesome. Councilmember Parsi.
I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that the tree code is being updated, and the update starts with a community engagement. The second learning session is on Tuesday, 5 to 6 p.m., June 2nd. So that's a great one for public to attend. And the other details for that is that the technical committee process happens in July, and it will come to the council in sometime between January to March of 2027.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Ooh, the HVAC just shut out, so just shut off. So you know you're getting a little later. Anything else for council talk time tonight? Councilmember Kritzer.
I'll just lift something up, having just done the ombuds this last month. I'd say one of the things we got the most feedback on was on this Mary Moore parking situation. And just wanted to throw out there whether there's interest in the council of maybe a committee or some other space, just getting a briefing from staff where we as a council could talk about the issue, hear more directly about what we're getting as feedback and what the plan is going forward, so that we could all do that together.
Great. Is there interest in that recommendation? I know a few folks had also let me know that they were going to speak directly with staff on that. Does anyone have an update from staff that they've reached out and spoken to staff?
I don't have direct information yet that I can share on that, but yeah, and I don't want to put our planning director on the spot, but I would love to schedule some time.
Okay. We will add it to the list. Seeing lots of interest in that around the table, and yes, it's an interest an area we've heard a lot about. Yes, Councilmember Forsyth.
One more thing that we've been seeing a lot more this month in particular that I wanted to flag, we've been getting a lot of contacts about waste invoices and people complaining about Recology being 20%, 19% more than their waste management. So I just wanted to state on the record that the change was in order to avoid a 100% increase that from our previous hauler. So just want to make sure that community knows that we did our due diligence and this was actually a cost-saving measure for community compared to what we were getting back with a new contract in the competitive bid process.
Great, thank you. All right, seeing no other issues for council talk time tonight, we have reached the end of our agenda and we are adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.